Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Portsmouth City Council meeting for Monday, April 5, 2010, here in the Eileen Dondero Foley Council Chambers. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the City Clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Farini.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Noveline Clayburgh.
Here.
Councilor Lister.
Here.
Councilor Hetmanic.
Here.
Councilor Spear.
Here.
Councilor Dwyer.
Here.
Councilor Coviello.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Here.
Councilor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask Councilor Kennedy to lead us in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next portion of our meeting is two presentations, the first being Board and Commission quarterly reports from the Recreation Board and the Conservation Commission. And so I first see Carl Deemer out there. Carl, if you'd like to come forward, Chairman of the Recreation Board, and offer your presentation. Steve Miller, after that, will be here for Conservation Commission. Carl. Thank you, Carl. Thanks, Carl. Thank you.
How are you?
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Carl.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the Council, City Manager, and City Attorney. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come before you to give you an update on a quarterly report of the Recreation Department. I just handed out our spring-summer flyer that has all the programs that will be running over the next 5 months. And I'd like to go through and just give you a quick summary of what we've done in the past fall and the winter, and just point out that one of the best return on the investments the city has is within the Recreation Department. It seems that for not a lot of money, we affect so many lives, and we were able to go ahead and involve so many children and adults in recreation activities. And I'd just like to, bring it to your attention. I thought I was pretty impressed with it by what we support. Just getting through and talking about the Connie Bean, what goes on down there. We have between boys high school, girls high school, boys junior high, kindergarten basketball, and boys and girls grade 1 through 4 basketball, supports over 450 players and members that participate in that program. There's typically a Sunday open court that will support 50 to 60 players every Sunday. There's a Christmas vacation basketball camp that supports 25. And then on throughout, an elementary ski program, youth turkey shoot, 140 people. Middle school dances, there's 200 participants that come to those dances. Also, right on through to a father-daughter dance that supports over 400 participants that go to that. And that's always been a big success for our department. And just even the biweekly trips to New York, we usually have about 50 people that will sign up and go to the biweekly trips that we have to New York. With the sports leagues, men's basketball and co-ed dodgeball, over at Spinnaker Point, the program participation, we have over 80 participants in the men's basketball. We also have 135 in the co-ed dodgeball. You didn't think so many people played dodgeball, did you? So there's 215 right there. And then getting into further Spinnaker Point programs, between the senior exercise, there's aerobics, line dancing, spin class, boot camp, Zumba class, yoga, yoga Pilates, Tai Chi, Aquasize 1 and Aquasize 2. There's 2 different levels. and then dance exercise with Pilates. And that supports over 180 people right there that are participating in those classes. The fitness center receives about 180 daily users out of that center, which I thought was quite impressive for that size of facility. So again, get back to, I think it's a good ROI. The pool program. Pool program since September 1st till now, with the infant and toddler programs, basic preschool, advanced preschool, and then level 1 through 5, supports over 1,172 participants that participated in all the programs since just September 1st. The adult swim programs, the beginner programs, and stroke proficiency and triathlon will support over 91. Lifeguard courses support over 51 participants that attend the lifeguard courses. And of course, this doesn't include a lot of special events that go on. As you know, the city is nearing a completion of its recreational needs study, which will be the focus of the future of the city's recreation infrastructure, including outdoor playing fields and our indoor facilities as well. These are a valuable asset to our community and support many, many people. Currently, the city's consultant, the architectural team, is working on finalizing the draft report for the Recreation Board review. After the Recreation Board has had an opportunity to review and ask the questions of the architectural team about the details, the Rec Board will then forward the report on to the City Council for your review. We hope that this process will be completed and the report in your hands as soon as possible, and hopefully as soon as the end of this month. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank everyone who participated in the public process for the report. We had a lot of good, healthy input from everybody. As you know, we held 3 widely attended public input sessions on the study. In addition, the city and consultants met with various stakeholders throughout the city, league representatives and others. We also received over 140 comments that were submitted via the city website that gave us a lot of good input for consideration as we move forward. I'm also looking forward to reviewing this report with the other members on the Recreation Committee and also with the board, and also forward it along to City Council as soon as possible. Thank you for your support. Our budget, really for what we have as just running over 1.1 million, just gets us a lot of good satisfaction to a lot of people and supports a lot of good programs, as well as the pool, which I know has been an issue and well talked about. But as you can see, that's why I wanted to get those numbers in front of you for your consideration. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Carl. Questions for Carl? Seeing no one seek to raise any at this time, thank you very much for your hard work and the hard work of the Recreation Board. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Steve Miller from the Conservation Commission.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. The Conservation Commission report is pretty brief here. The first thing I just wanted to mention is that the new zoning ordinance, with changes to Article 10, the environmental protection standards, have resulted in the Conservation Commission seeing new permit applications. The CC, Conservation Commission, has quickly gotten comfortable with the ordinances and the changes within it. And I'm sorry, I have a cold this afternoon, and I feel like I am not 100%, so I apologize for my choppiness. But basically, the changes have not resulted in a problem with either workload or permit specifics. And I've only taken an aspirin. You'd think I was on something else.
Steve. It's cool.
Overall, the Conservation Commission, we're very happy with the new ordinances. We received our first draft of the public undeveloped lands assessment, the study that we have ongoing. So we have our first draft that we've received from Mark West, the consultant that was hired to do that. The Conservation Commission is currently reviewing that draft. We have a work meeting week after next, and we're hoping to have it in final form by June. And the Conservation Commission, we're really excited about this report. I think it's going to be very valuable to the city. There's going to be a ton of information in that report. As you may recall, the city owns about 200 properties. The Conservation Commission went through that list of properties and selected out about 90 that we felt had the highest conservation value. And then we hired a consultant to do an ecological assessment of those 90 parcels. So we're going to get a very detailed assessment of those lands, what's on those lands, the state that they're in. It'll give us opportunities for doing, going for restoration money, for restoration work. It'll help us do a better job, we believe, to manage the lands that we own here in the city. The Conservation Commission just kind of would like to request of the council, this is not because we think you need something to do. We know that you're extremely busy, but we're anxious to get the prime wetlands final process moved on. As you know, the Planning Board and Conservation Commission spent a lot of time evaluating the wetlands in the city, collecting all the data and information and maps that we needed to. And so the final stage, I believe, is for the City Council to approve the wetlands that qualify for prime to be sent on to DES, and then DES goes through their own evaluation process. So it's not the final stage, but they need to evaluate what we've done, and then we'll have the final say. So I know you guys are really busy, but that process has been ongoing for quite a while, and I was trying to find out today online if there's a deadline on some of that information. Sometimes they want the maps to be of a certain age, and as you recall, Peter Britz, the environmental planner and sustainability coordinator, got a grant from the Piscataqua Regional Estuaries Partnership to pay for our mapping costs, so no city funds were used in that. And I was trying to find out if there was a time limit on those maps. I couldn't find that out today, but I think it'd be good for us to, when you get a chance, for us to complete that process and move that on. Two more items. As the chair of the Conservation Commission, in my day job, I've been doing a lot with climate change and climate change adaptation strategies and plans, and there's a lot of activity, a lot of things going on. I think it might be a good time, again, not because I think you lack a task at hand, but at some point soon, I think we should probably formulate a committee to really start thinking about adaptation strategies for the city. The importance in this is really in that it'll save the city money in the long run. If you get a good adaptation strategy, a plan in place, you can take advantage of efficiencies of things that are already going on. Climate change will affect all aspects of city life, and of course the information will always be incoming. We really need to have a good adaptive management strategy in place so that as new and better information comes in, we can adapt our plan to save the taxpayers and save the city money where we can as we deal with the changes that we're going to get hit with. I think the recent rains are just one indication. You know, the 100-year storms becoming way too frequent, and even just from a stormwater management standpoint, I think we'll want to think about what we need to do and to adapt and save money on that. The last thing I have is just that we have 2 alternate positions available on the Conservation Commission. We'd like to get those filled. Alternates play a very important role on the commission. They help us fill a quorum when a member cannot be there. And in reality, it's really our only training for new commissioners as well. So we like to get them on board, have them in those alternate seats before we need them to step up. So when you get a chance, we'd appreciate being able to fill those. So with that, I'll end and take any questions.
Questions for Steve? Tony?
Steve, has your board done any work with vernal pool mapping as part of the prime wetland?
Yes, we did a vernal pool study year before last, I believe, and mapped. The study was, again, Mark West did that for us. He's done a lot of our work in terms of wetlands. It was a very good report with the qualification that, of course, we couldn't send him out to walk every square foot of the city. So what he did is he did some not really high tech. It was actually low tech, but it was the best tech in terms of evaluating areas that had vernal pool characteristics or where we thought vernal pools existed. So that's been done. The city has that. Peter Britz has copies of that, and we've been using that, and it's also going to be part of the number of studies that we've had done that really give us a good evaluation of what we have here in the city.
Is that part of the prime wetland study at all, or will that be?
It's separate from the prime wetlands. We did that separately just to get a good sense of where where pools, vernal pools, were likely to be, and we have those areas mapped out.
Further questions for the chairman? Okay, thank you very much for your hard work and the hard work of the commission.
Thank you very much.
Our next report is the quarterly wastewater treatment.
Your Honor, as requested by the City Council, David Allen's here along with the consulting team and Peter Britz to give our update on the wastewater treatment plant quarterly report. One item in here that I just wanted to mention is, in addition to this presentation this evening, at the request of the City Council, we've scheduled a additional meeting on April 27th at 6:30 p.m. for follow-up questions and answers with city staff and the consulting team that was requested by the Friends of the South End, and that's going to take place at the Levinson Room at the library. So that's April 27th at 6:30 p.m. David?
Thank you,
you,
John.
David.
Good evening, City Manager, members of the Council. As John said, I'm here with Peter Rice, our City Engineer for the Water and Sewer Divisions, as well as Peter Goodwin from Weston and Sampson and Mark Allenwood for Brown and Caldwell. Most of you have sat through a number of these. I think we're on this could be our 11th quarterly update. And the master plan, again, takes the long-term control plan, our CSO issues, and studies those, as well as our wastewater treatment facilities. As you're all aware, we're under a consent agreement to upgrade the Pierce Island treatment plant to secondary treatment. These two are both very interrelated. Tonight, what we're going to focus on, particularly after our February 5th meeting where we had just gotten out of our value engineering study, we're going to be focusing on the wastewater treatment options. And I think it's important to note that after that meeting, after our value engineering, we did submit our alternatives evaluation on March 1st as required by the consent agreement. And in that document, we did have two options that we're still continuing to look at. And part of what you're going to hear tonight is that the reason we can't define a clear option at this point is that there are regulatory hurdles, there is some uncertainty, and there are certainly a number of issues associated with where the outfall is, what the permit limits are going to be. And so we're continuing to follow both those paths at this time. And I'm going to turn this over to Peter Goodwin. He's going to give you a little update as to where we are right now.
Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, councilors. It's going to take a little time to walk through this, so be patient, but you've seen this slide before. In the middle, we call our decision matrix on the outside of the various components. And tonight, I'm going to briefly walk through each of these components and kind of have a summary slide of where we stand with that. And then we'll talk about the alternatives that are on the plate. Some of our frustrations, as Dave has said, in working through over a two and a half year period and really not being provided the appropriate guidance from the regulatory community for a number of reasons. They're actively moving forward with their nutrient evaluation in the Great Bay. It's a significant challenge and frustrating at times. First, regulatory input. The NPDES, or National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, as Dave said, you currently have been issued a secondary permit for Pierce Island. However, the regulators have indicated that a total nitrogen limit will be included in the next permit. However, they haven't given us a final number for that, and they won't at this point. These limits may go down as low as 3. We've talked about 8, 5, and 3 at some of our previous quarterly updates. And quite frankly, that's what's called the limit of technology, and in cold weather climates, sometimes that is a challenge to achieve those limits on a monthly basis. So in summary, for the permit, the NPDES permit, they drive the technology selection, the size, and ultimately the cost, which is, from the user standpoint, the most important. Interestingly enough, back in, I guess it was June of last year, Paul Currier from DES had a presentation, and this was a slide actually out of his presentation that's very important to note. Here are your wastewater treatment facilities, about 19% of the total nitrogen load in Great Bay. Big elephant in the room is the non-point source. This is from tributaries and runoff.
septic systems, agricultural, stormwater, things like that. Important thing here is the regulators can point to the point sources as the first attempt to reduce those nitrogen loads, and that's a major item. Just briefly, this is kind of the regulatory timeline. We've been meeting, and these are our formal meetings and communications with the EPA and DES. I want to highlight a few of them because they are important. It shows the confusion and the frustrations that we've had. Back in May, the DEA stated at that time that you'd probably see nitrogen limits of about 8 milligrams per liter in the Great Bay wastewater treatment facilities. This was kind of exciting because biologically you can easily achieve that, and it was what we had hoped for, especially at the Pierce Island plant or the Pease plant, which are further downstream. In September, we had a preliminary meeting prior to our draft alternatives evaluation submission in December with the regulators. We shortly thereafter met with you, and leaving that meeting, we presented an option or preferred alternative that we were moving in towards of 8 milligrams per liter and a phased approach, one that would be able to be implemented over a number of years at the Pease wastewater treatment facility. And the quote that came out of that meeting from the regulators was, "We like what we see, you're going in the right direction." However, in December of 2009, EPA came out with a document that said that the 8 milligram per liter limit for total nitrogen recommended by DES was, they thought, unsupportable. So even the regulatory community is going back and forth on where they stand. In January 2010, after we submitted the alternatives evaluation, EPA and DES basically said anti-degradation is going to cause a concern about our preferred alternative, which was to shed flow over to Pease, build that facility up over time, and use the existing Pease outfall. Again, more confusion from their part. Most recently, back in March, we were briefed by the national and the regional administrators from the EPA, and the one quote we took out of there was, "Cities and towns and communities should plan for future regulatory changes," and that was their quote at that point. It was certainly frustrating from our perspective because, as Peter reminded me as we were putting this together, the city's completed over 5 studies since 1997, looking at the long-term control plan, master planning efforts, and is continually working on their long-term control plan with State Street and the Bartlett Street area projects and the like. However, in summary here, you must construct a new secondary treatment plant with the flexibility to meet lower limits down the road. Where that is, we'll talk about in a minute. We're required as part of the consent decree to submit a draft master plan on June 1st. We've talked about this in the previous quarterly updates. And with hopefully some comment from DES and EPA, we will be submitting a final plan on September 1st, 2010. And that plan will have a recommended implementation schedule from the city's perspective. Further down, we're talking about the wastewater treatment plant must be designed to treat the required limits, which again are yet to be determined. The direction on the permit from the regulators has constantly been evolving. We've kind of gone over that. So again, back to the components, public input. Back in 2007, we had a wastewater 101. We've had a number of different meetings, over 10 city council quarterly updates. One that I'd like to point out is back in the summer of 2008, we felt it was important from our team and the city's perspective to sit down with the non-governmental organizations and talk to them about the technologies we were looking at and the myriad of options we were looking at. And it was actually a very productive meeting with them. And finally, April 27th, we're going to have a public input meeting for people to ask as many questions as they want about some of the product we have. These next few will be a little bit brief. Wastewater flows, really, we're looking at 2030 flows, which is the master planning 20-year cycle. We did run those flows out to 2060, and there is a small differential, but in reality, the 2030 flows with the variability in economics are what we are targeting. Basically, the flows will size the plant, how much concrete, how many tanks, and things like that, and the pumping stations that will need to move the wastewater around. Technology, The technology screening summary, we were looking at these permit limits, and we knew we had to meet the 8. We needed a footprint or a site or a facility that could be upgraded cost effectively to meet lower limits, as they're talking about, again, with no clear direction. Obviously, we wanted ease of operations, we wanted reliability, we wanted not the first serial number of a technology, we wanted energy use reductions, sustainable type facilities, and ultimately, in addition, you have to look at cost at some point, and that's both capital cost and annual operating cost of the different technologies. I think we looked at about 40 different alternatives. Site selection, again, quickly, we've touched on this in our previous meetings. For the facility we're looking at 10-acre parcels. That pretty much boiled down to the existing Pierce Island site, the Pease facility, and or a riverfront industrial site, which is now off the table. We'll get to that. All of these sites obviously would have further engineering done on them for potential environmental impacts before the final decision is made. Affordability. Last fall, when we were nearing the completion of our submission of the draft TM5, which was the alternatives evaluation, we were drilling down from a very high level at the beginning of our project down to a lower level, looking at these technologies and their costs, and I think we presented costs ranging, depending on the technology and the site, $60 to over $100 million. And basically, we felt that might be unaffordable for the city of Portsmouth to move forward with. EPA has guidelines or guidance documents that allow for affordability to be evaluated. And basically, it's not negotiated with them to not do the project. It's basically negotiated to extend the time frame so that the city and its residents and ratepayers can pay for it. The approach takes a look at the sewer-related costs as a percentage of your median household income. It also takes a look at such factors as the socioeconomic and financial and debt considerations, other projects that the city has involved with, and the impacts on businesses, attracting businesses, keeping businesses in the city. And the EPA affordability threshold for the city of Portsmouth is 2% of the median household income. And you'll see that in a subsequent slide. Okay, the current alternatives. Basically, it has boiled down to 2. We touched on this in February, shortly after the value engineering exercise was completed. That's to expand the Pease facility or upgrade the Pierce Island facility. And to caveat that, so to speak, there are regulatory and construction issues that may impact the ability to stay within the fence line. Obviously, that is our goal for this alternative. And each, as we've talked about, each alternative impacts the collection system and the long-term control plan as that moves forward. Okay, Pease. Several pros. It can be designed and constructed and implemented to meet the lower nitrogen limits. It's a proven technology. It's basically the technology that's currently being used, sequencing batch reactor systems. And it's consistent with the public goal of reclaiming Pierce Island. Cons, it could have a significant increase in capital cost if those limits are continually driven down from 8 to 5 to 3. It will require some additional pumping to reroute the flow to Pease. We've talked about that in our previous meetings. And more recently, as I talked about in the previous slide, back in January with the anti-degradation issue, may limit or eliminate the use of the Pease outfall, which is upstream, from being considered, and may therefore require pumping back to the Pierce Island outfall. A last con, I suppose, is if the Pease outfall can be used, EPA may still impose a stricter limit than one that would be at Pierce Island, just due to the proximity to Great Bay. It's about 1.5 miles upriver. This slide will kind of walk you through the rerouting. It is the most cost-effective rerouting, and it uses your existing infrastructure. Previous slides that we had presented, we talked about using phasing and running the Lafayette and Borthwick Ave sewers over to the Pease earlier. we felt we should move the flow all the way down through the system so we wouldn't be building new pump stations. So basically, Deer Street Pump Station would be rerouted along Market Street, Woodbury, and to the Pease facility. Once that's complete and the Pease facility is upgraded to meet those flows, we would then take Mechanic Street and build a dry weather station, basically taking your dry weather, your base sanitary wastewater flows, and bring it back to Deer Street and ultimately over to Pease. And then finally, a Pierce Island wastewater treatment facility would be constructed to shed the flow. And here are your major costs. It's around $15 million to do that. There's your existing Pease outfall, and that's ultimately the goal of a preferred option would be to reuse that outfall, but right now we're in a state of flux with the regulators on that. If it was required to reroute the flow, we've looked at a couple of different scenarios, and basically an effluent pump station would be built at Pease, and then following that alignment along Woodbury and Market Street, we would come to the salt pile, so to speak, and we're looking at a subaqueous pipeline, certainly a lot of permitting thresholds and limits that we would have to follow, but trying to construct a pipeline through downtown or along a route around the perimeter of the downtown area is much more costly based on the cost information we're able to get. And subaqueous outfalls have been used in other parts of Great Bay, so or subaqueous pipelines. The cost of that is around $15 million. This is an aerial. I think you've seen this before. Here's Route 16, Spalding Turnpike, the Ford dealership. Your existing Pease facility here, and this is modifications to basically bring that up to about 7.5 MGD. The new tankage would encroach upon the existing ball field here, and there'd be some other buildings. And again, this option is kind of a stripped-down option from what we presented earlier through the planning in order to look at those capital cost numbers and reuse as much of your infrastructure as we can. As part of the value engineering exercise, which we briefly touched on February 5th, the VE team was tasked as a task to basically say, okay, is there any type of high rate treatment option that could be shoehorned in to the existing Pierce Island site? Basically not impinging upon the existing fence line, the historical Fort Washington, the guidance for the Coast Guard guidance channel, things like that. And again, look at reusing some of that existing infrastructure, those existing buildings out there. The pros again, the technology that could fit on the island, which is different from the SBR, can meet low total nitrogen limits. And we're able to maximize the use. Basically, all of that wastewater is continuing to flow to Pierce Island. The cons, as we see them, is it's obviously counter to the city's goal of reclaiming Pierce Island. There may be some impacts to Fort Washington. Again, this planning document is at the 10,000 foot level. We've drilled down a lot deeper in our analysis than typically is done for these master plans, but it is not a final design. So you need to keep that in mind. Certainly there'd be additional truck traffic to meet lower limits. There'd be the truck traffic for construction, but also chemicals to be delivered to the facility in order to knock this nitrogen down. The technology, while it is tried and true, does have limits and historical concerns with oil and grease fouling the membranes. The city has a lot of restaurants, a lot of older infrastructure with those restaurants, and is working on their oil and grease problem, but it is a con in this regard. And the last one here is the life cycle costs may be greater. The manufacturers who we've sat down with, several different ones, will give you an interval to replace these little membranes. And historically, we've seen them fail sooner than that interval. So while we've been slightly conservative, instead of maybe a 10-year replacement, we've looked at a 7-year replacement. As a con, we've included this as maybe a concern that they aren't living up to their expectations. This is the aerial that we've shown before, and again, the Fort Washington is the channel markers coming down there. New headworks facility, reusing some of the existing facilities, reusing the filter building, and upgrading the dewatering area. So we are able to stay within the fence line, but again, this is not a final design. Back to the decision matrix, that touches base on all of those components that are involved in a master plan. Now, the important news, capital cost comparisons. And again, frustration is part of this because we're looking at 3 different permit limits here just to continue to move forward on your consent decree here. And it can become confusing. But what I want to focus on is, let's focus on this TN of 8. We've got basically, I talked about 2 alternatives, but we felt from a capital cost standpoint, we need to show the P's A and B. So what you see here is Pierce Island, the wastewater treatment facility cost of around $51 million. This is capital cost. No flow redirection because you're going to use your existing infrastructure. So your total capital cost is around $51 million. Again, stripped down version from previous versions of last fall when we were looking at all new facilities. The second row here is upgrading P's and using the P's outfall. Capital cost, $34 million for the wastewater plant, $15 million to route the flow over there for a total of $49. And then the last row here is P's with a Pierce Island outfall. Again, 30 for a total of 64. That's capital cost. And as you see, driving down to the lower limits, because of the technology that could fit on Pierce Island, the capital cost does not change. However, at P's, the capital cost grows significantly to drop to the 5, and then to drop to the 3, it's the same because basically all that is adding more chemical to drop that nitrogen down. And this is where our frustration is. These critical answers that we need to make a recommendation so that you can select a preferred alternative cause significant capital cost impacts there. We don't make decisions or recommendations to you based on capital, so this is the same table, but it talks about life cycle costs. Take your annual O&M costs, which vary from technology to technology. This is your additional O&M, and basically creates a present value using 5% a 20-year window. So again, the TN of 8, life cycle costs, 109, 112, and 128 for the 3 different options. One of the questions that always comes up is bringing it back home. What's the typical impact for a typical user? The average user rate right now for wastewater is about $600 per year, round numbers. This table we put together to take a look at, okay, what is the additional debt and the additional impact from this project alone? So this column is the additional debt, and we picked, $20 million intervals. What you would see here is the user rate for a $40 million additional debt using the programming that's currently in place, your long-term control plan, your ongoing O&M costs, and other projects like Bartlett Street, State Street, those impacts. $40 million of additional debt for the wastewater treatment facility project, the capital numbers that I talked about a couple slides ago, would raise the rate for the typical user to about $1,400 a year. That's significant. We talked about that 2% threshold, and even that project right there gets it over that threshold. So we'd be looking to negotiate out that schedule. It's significant, and a lot of communities are seeing these increases. So moving forward, we're going to submit the draft wastewater master plan to EPA. It's taking all of the technical memorandums we put together and putting them into one document. Ultimately, we will meet the September 1st final wastewater plan, and as I note here, this includes that final implementation schedule, which we're starting to work on now. We're continuing to pursue the regulatory clarifications on limits and locations, outfall, anti-degradation, those types of things, and trying to get some of these things in writing and not just informal conversations. And as Dave said, and we've previously talked about, the additional public input meeting. Again, just to kind of summarize, the city will need to build a secondary facility to meet the consent decree. We need to continue to refine these alternatives. We've got to get rid of the regulatory hurdles. And it is good to note that there is regional cooperation. The Southeast Watershed Alliance, I think, is meeting again this week. Peter is very active on that. And they're pushing for additional science and data gathering to be considered by the regulators so that cost-effective and sustainable recommendations and projects move forward. So with that.
Questions for Peter? Council Kennedy?
Yeah, Peter, have you looked at hooking a pipe up and bringing it down at the end of the P's?
That's what it is.
It's this item 3.
Just need a little clarification. Looked at hooking a pipe up.
At the outflow and bringing just the pipe down through the river. You had going through the community.
That was the $15 million option that he did show.
Okay, but that's going through the community, though. You said it was going through.
Just going, I got you now. Going subaqueous, basically, from the existing Pease site all the way down the river. No, we didn't do that. I think the reason was the distance and we worked with a couple of marine contractors. We kind of ran our numbers, had them come in, talked about some of the other projects they've done, put some pricing together, and it's close to almost $1,000 a foot. So since we felt the distance is much longer than coming cross country from Pease, and since the Market Street Woodbury corridor is somewhat wide, there are some utilities, and since we would be running a force main out to Pease, you would have you could do them. You could construct those pipes all at the same time, in the same trench. So you have the trench open, the paving, and those types of things. So
and I realize that, but I also realize sometimes that the EPA, if we can move more of our wastewater down from where it is currently, we might get a little positive support somehow. So in other words, we wouldn't be moving just what we're trying to get to the plant, but we'd also be moving what's already up at the plant. You'd be moving to the outflow down farther so that it's closer to getting it out of the Great Bay Estuary.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be, I would wonder if EPA would look that higher, and also maybe they would be able to support us in improvement of the estuary.
You're talking about going down below the Pierce Island, because that option we're talking about does include bringing the Pease outfall down to where the existing Pierce Island outfall is. That's the option that he's talking about.
I think what Councilor Kennedy was saying was to eliminate the construction through the city to this point, take a pipe from there and run it all the way down the river. But
That's
the
what I'm
distance
saying.
from here to here using a subaqueous pipe per foot cost would make it a lot more money.
Okay. I was just curious
You're-
because you wouldn't
right,
have the
yeah.
construction, but also you could maybe work a deal with the EPA and DES that you're taking not only
You're taking that.
effluent, but you're taking everything out and you're moving it to a more sustainable place and delivering it versus having it outflow right into the estuaries. So I know people make deals, and I guess that would be a question I have.
Yeah, we'll certainly consider.
Someone care to answer that statement or question?
I think that outfall that we're talking about is all of the flow. We would discontinue using the other Pease outfall. We would just have the one.
No matter if it went over land
Right.
or underwater, it would take all the flow
Correct.
back at the outflow on Pierce Island.
Found, correct, yes.
Further questions? Councilor Dwyer.
Does this all still presume that we would have stormwater overflow at the Pierce Island plant, that we would have like a secondary for stormwater no matter what we did?
Yes, this can, basically, if we're looking at shedding flow out to Pease and putting it in the river, whether at the existing location or back, that the Pierce Island facility would continue as a wet weather facility.
Wet weather facility.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
A question, during this most recent water, all the trucks going out to Pierce Island, were they removing excess water off Pierce Island, or were they delivering it, and where were they delivering it from?
We have a number of small pump stations. that get inundated in these types of events. So what we do is, rather than have them overflow, they send the tanker trucks out and actually pump those down and bring those over to Pierce Island. So they're actually taking wastewater that doesn't have room in the collection system and bring that over to the treatment plant.
Okay, so that was not private people dumping, because they were
No,
private trucks.
We hire those.
Okay, because they were going quite rapidly, and there's like, we monitored like 5 and 15 minutes, so I was just curious.
Further questions? Council Coviello.
Do you have an example of how they look at the businesses? I mean, as you mentioned, we have a lot of restaurants, a lot of water usage, and I see we have that 2% threshold for median income. How do they handle that with a restaurant? I mean, I imagine their water flow is much higher than an average home. Do you have an example of what they've done in the past?
You want to grab it?
Mark Allenwood with Brown and Caldwell. The EPA affordability analysis only considers residential user rate. It does not take into consideration any commercial or industrial users. However, we have a methodology of addressing that. It may be considered by EPA in the overall argument, but it's actually not part of the affordability analysis. So we are also evaluating the impact on the businesses, but it's really not part of their standard guideline.
I know it'd be really hard to give me this number, but do you have any sense on how much more water a restaurant uses? I mean, I know it depends on a lot of things, but order of magnitude, is it just 3 times, 10 times, 100 times? I mean,
Than a resident.
the standard residence.
Probably 10 times.
Yeah.
10 times? Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask a follow-up to that question. To what extent do the numbers that you showed on a cost per household basis, given that it's done with residential ratepayers, to what extent does that number not include any monies figured in for funds we would receive from commercial establishment, or does that number take into consideration that those calculations have been done?
It includes. Yeah, it includes that the restaurants and commercial connections are paying their bill.
Is there a way that at some point in time we can see that broken out so that taxpayers have an understanding as to who pays what, why, and how?
Yes.
Councilor Dwyer.
I understand from what you said that the nitrogen limit threshold isn't clear yet, but even if it were to be at 8 right now, given the sort of ambiguity and the fluctuations that we've seen over the last year, would your recommendation be to us setting a threshold at 8, or would you be recommending a 5 threshold just because of, we're building something to last for 30 to 100 years?
I mean, we would probably recommend an alternative that had the flexibility
to go to 5.
To go lower.
Or to go to 3.
Right, but you wouldn't necessarily build it. However, as you saw, to fit on Pierce Island, the technology you have to use, basically the capital cost of that is the same for A5 and 3.
Right.
I saw Councilor Noveline Clayburgh, then Councilor Kennedy.
When we had the presentation at our retreat in February, it appeared that Pierce Island was going to be a lot more cost-effective. And this chart here, again, shows the same thing. Is it your belief that the Pierce Island facility will come in at considerably lower dollars than the Ps?
Not necessarily. We do have an adder for construction on the island, constructed with an active plant in, keeping that running. Ps is a lot easier to construct around. You could add modules and the like. And you need to understand that the numbers we presented back in February 1st from the VE perspective were basically, that was done that week. So that was a really tight time frame. The other numbers were using facility analysis that we were going to construct basically new facilities. And the analogy is, when we looked at Pierce Island before, we said the residuals building that handles the solids and dewaters them, we would replace the entire building. Mm-hmm. But looking at the numbers we were coming out at and knowing that the affordability was going to not work, we had to look down at a stripped down version. So these numbers, which are lower, utilize that same building, put new equipment into it, maybe don't upgrade the H&V to the levels we would have. So that's the challenge that we had in trying to get something that's really implementable.
Further, Council
you.
Kennedy. Yep. Then Council Lister.
You say there's potential impacts of Fort Washington. What would those potential impacts be in your vision here? And then also, being so close to the waterways and trying to build within that 150-foot buffer and all that good stuff, where does that fit in this? Because I don't see any EPA or anything like that if you do have an expansion, which you show on the slide.
First to the Fort Washington, the 106 permitting requirement, we're just not sure unless you get something in front of them. We just tried to keep our new structures outside of the areas that have previously been designated. However, one of the first things that would be done out there would be some borings or test pits to see, in these new areas where we need to build tanks or buildings, and you'd have to do an archaeological evaluation of that, and who knows what's going to be found. That footprint for Fort Washington may increase. You follow me?
You could potentially get out there and start building and have an increase because of archaeological. And what have you found in your experience an increase in archaeological potentially cost out at? Do you have any idea?
Well, at this point, if you notice, the majority of the new, here's the existing filter building that would be reused for the new high rate technology. The majority of the new buildings are within I guess the footprint of some of the existing structures, the only one being the new headworks facility, which hydraulically has to be at the top of the hill. So, we just note it as a concern, because until you cross that bridge, you don't know. However, based on where we're able to locate these things, it does make it a very tight site, and I'm sure Paula and staff may not be happy because of the tightness of the site and building tanks adjacent to existing structures and things like that. But we feel that there is a good chance we could fit a facility on the island.
Okay, and what kind of chemicals are going to be out there? Do you see? I saw a chemical building in this.
Yeah. Sure.
We would continue to have chlorine for disinfection. We also may require it as part of the treatment process for cleaning membranes. And we would have methanol, depending on what the nitrogen limit is.
Can you tell me how much chlorine you'd have, potentially? Housed out there?
The same as what you're using now, right?
20,000 gallon tank right here.
Yeah.
It's currently a 20,000 gallon tank. We would expect to use less than that because the secondary process would be clean enough that we would just disinfect it with UV instead of chlorine.
Councilor Lister.
Could you talk again about the life expectancy for a facility either at Pease or on Pierce Island, what the projected life expectancy might be? Or what are you shooting for?
Well, typically it's 50 years for structures and 30 years for equipment, 20, 30 years for equipment. Now, there is replacement costs included in the life cycle analysis for pump impellers and the membranes and things like that, blowers, and those intervals of replacement change depending on what the equipment is.
And maybe one
Yeah,
more.
sure, Councilor Lister.
And with that, knowing that, before you said there was substantial cost to the taxpayer, does that decrease over those, even with the replacement of equipment and buildings and everything? Is there any chance that might decrease over time, the cost to the taxpayer?
On the sewer user rate? Yes. I don't see it that way. When the bonds are paid off, obviously the city would continue to reevaluate its facilities and its rates. So 20, 30 years after the bonds are paid off, you may be able to lower them.
Thank you.
Councilor Spear.
I'd like to ask a political question, if I may. This is regarding the pie chart that you had on slide 6, the total nitrogen loads. It's going to be a big question, but I see this pie chart as an opportunity for us politically when I think about the additional expense we were talking about going from 8 to 5 to 3 and the very minor contribution those reductions would have in the total nitrogen for the bay. And you mentioned at the end of your talk the Watershed Alliance as something that we're participating in. I guess building on what Councilor Kennedy said, a lot of this stuff is a negotiation with the EPA. I wonder, is there any role for the council to have, I think we're more effective than just the staff from the standpoint of taking a lead role in the Watershed Alliance to try to build credibility with the EPA to show that we're interested in reducing the load for the bay, including non-point sources, to try to push to lower from 8 to 5 to 3, or, we don't want to go lower, right, in terms of the cost from a point source because of the expense. Is there any way we can have that type of, send a message, I don't know how it's done procedurally, but have that message come out from Portsmouth saying that we're serious about reducing the loads in the bay in terms of the big pie that you have there, and would that build us some credibility in terms of then they would say, okay, 8, at least for the next 20 years, 8 is good for you guys from your point sources.
Yeah. If I might, Your Honor,
Yeah.
the staff has been working with EPA and DES regarding these issues. Primarily, we're not dealing with engineers at the EPA. We deal with a lot of their compliance attorneys. The issue really comes down to convincing them through science, because we need to, as I've been told many times by the city staff, that EPA and DES has their science, and we need to work together with the surrounding towns to try to create our science to try to show why we believe that the 8 limit would be appropriate at that location. So the council's involvement, will be asking for the council probably to sign on to a letter at some point, which would be great. But I think it really comes down to the science that we can provide them, because that's what they're going to hang their hat on regarding this issue. This is a new area. Every city and town in the region is dealing with the total nitrogen limit, and we're not the only ones that are going to be exposed from a cost perspective. So we will keep you advised where necessary. We would then utilize maybe our congressionals to talk to the EPA, but by and large, EPA follows a certain mandate that they have, and this is one of them that they're looking at very closely to keep this rate, this level below the 8 is what we've been hearing. But again, we're working with the surrounding towns to try to come up with, number one, the financial impacts that will affect not only Portsmouth but the region, and number two, to try to come up with some kind of science that supports why we want to leave it at the total nitrogen level of 8.
Okay.
Further comments or questions? Okay, I'll just add, before we move on, thank you very much, that I think the council, and my fellow councilors can certainly jump in to say that we certainly don't want to receive a deal with, we need to approve this by Tuesday. I think the idea would be that we'd want some lead time with some time for significant discussion, inquiry, policy input, well in advance of any deadlines where we were presented with a "we must sign this now" kind of thing. And I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds.
Well, Your Honor, the staff is willing, ready, and able to do that. But the real problem that we have is that we're waiting every time we put in our technical memorandums, we put them in, and we wait. And in one instance, we waited till technical memorandum number 5 was sent in. We actually got a call on technical memorandum number 4 2 days after technical memorandum number 5 was put in. Well, we had to submit technical memorandum number 5 because we're under a consent decree. And if we miss those dates, we can be fined. So what I'm saying to you is that we're at the, we really are at the direction of the EPA in these instances and the DES. So we're working hard with them, and that's why we're looking at these two alternatives. We want to make sure we give you all the best information can have to make this this very significant decision. But I want to make sure everybody understands, It's a two-way street, and we've been providing them the information required, because if we don't, we'll get fined. And they don't get fined if they don't send us back their responses. So that's where we're at.
Council Kennedy. Thanks,
Given
John.
that we have 2 months before that June deadline, I was wondering if we could put it kind of on the agenda on a regular basis, just for a brief update where we're at.
Well, Your Honor, if I might respond to that. At some point, Council, we may have to have a non-public session, because what we may have to do is look at certain legal options that we have. Because, and I don't want to get too far into that tonight, but certainly, if not, we need responses.
Thank you. Further questions or inquiry on this one? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. And we need we need a motion on the minutes of March 15, 2010.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the minutes. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous. Next, we have the public comment session, and I would like to take this opportunity to say that we have 4 speakers listed for public comment. However, it appears 3 out of the 4 are speaking regarding the civilian flagging ordinance, which is on for indeed a public hearing. So, it would be typical under a circumstance like this that an individual who had listed themselves for the public comment, where you get a 3-minute limit, would typically wait and speak at the public hearing, where, of course, there is no limit to the amount of time that you can speak. And so I just offer that if people, I would respectfully request that they speak during the public hearing, but we do have 3 individuals, and it is a city council rule, as I am told by the city attorney. So with that, we've really only got 1 speaker under public comment, and then we're going to move to the next portion of the agenda, which will be the public hearings on the 2 ordinances before us this evening. So we haven't much longer to wait. With that, our first and only speaker under public comment would be Adam Leach.
This is weird. Thank you, Mayor, City Councilors. My name's Adam Leach from North Berwick, Maine. I stand before you tonight for 2 reasons. One's to fulfill a long-time dream of mine to one day stand at this podium and have Attorney Sullivan lift up his sign telling me my time is up, thank you. The other is to say goodbye. And though I'm not a resident of the city, I appreciate you allowing me to speak, because over the past 4 years covering the city of Portsmouth for the Herald, I feel like I've become one. Many of you know by now I recently accepted a new job that will, frankly, allow me to avoid these meetings that go to 11 p.m., as well as the ones that start at 7:30 a.m. Not to mention I'll get a lunch break from time to time. And I will be working in the city, but other than some freelance writing on occasion, you probably won't hear a whole lot from me. While I can't say who will be replacing me at this point, I promise I'll do my best to get them up to speed to help the Herald provide the type of quality media coverage I hope I have aimed to provide. From the first day I drove up to City Hall and went the wrong way up the side exit, prompting a stern glare from Chief LeClaire, who was coming up the opposite direction. I felt welcomed by city staff, elected officials, and the people who've lived here. You may have not always liked it when I called you, but you were always answering my calls, and as far as I remember, none of you hung up on me. I hope you have found my reporting to be fair, objective, and relevant, and at the very least, I hope you spelled your name right. Sorry, Jerry. Perhaps it's fitting that my last day will be the day the most difficult budget the city has seen in quite some time will be released. I wish you the best of luck in the budget process, and I'm actually a little sad I won't be part of it. Once you get entrenched in this stuff, it really becomes part of you. The fact that I've laid in bed more than one occasion unable to sleep because I'm trying to reconcile the latest debate on the middle school or the indoor pool, or whether or not the city should ban the balloons that float over the car dealerships is proof of that. The city, you people, have become a big part of my life, and I thank you for all your help and support over the years. I also want to thank the people watching. I understand it's not always easy talking to a reporter, particularly in times of great strife, but by telling the story of your life, you've inspired others to do more with their lives. I've personally been inspired by this community's unrelenting devotion to continually making this place a better place to live. Your willingness to share your stories with me has made it easier to share mine. I had the rare opportunity to write some very personal articles, particularly from my dad-to-dad columns. Some may have found those to be a little too personal. I remember one complaint about my description of discovering my son squishing his fecal matter between his fingers. Someone didn't really like that very much, but in journalism school they always taught us the details make the story. I sincerely want to thank all the people who asked me about my family or recognized me and told me they enjoyed my stories. I thoroughly enjoyed writing them. Being a reporter is not an easy job. The hours are tough, the deadlines are constant, and the content can be very challenging. From interviewing loved ones of the recently deceased to listening to Dave Holden and Lucy Tillman try to explain the unmet parking credit system. Each day presents something new, but it is a wonderful profession because every day you learn something new and develop a lot of great relationships along the way. I'll still be around. In fact, I may even come and complain about parking someday. But I wanted to take a moment and thank you and your constituents for helping make my time at the Herald a great experience. And thank you for the opportunity to tell your stories. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Adam Leach. Thank you. Adam, you better come up here. We're going to break the rules. Come on up here. Congratulations on your new endeavor, and here's a small token of our esteem from the City Council for being a vigilant public servant and holding up the end of the Fourth Estate in a sensible manner. We thank you very much.
Is it the key to the city?
It is not a key to the city. It is a paperweight, which I hope he does not throw at us.
Good luck, Adam.
Good luck, and thank you very much for your reporting over the years. Next, give Adam a chance to get back and start writing again. He's not done yet. We move on to our public hearings. We have two this evening. The first is an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 11, subsection 10.1115.4 and subsection 10.1115.42, amount of payment in lieu, the fee per parking space as of January 1 to be $2,000. And at this point, I see Planning Director Rick Tainer here, and I would ask him to come forward and briefly speak to that before we commence the public hearing in that regard.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. I will be brief. I just want to give a quick overview of the history of the zoning ordinance change and some of the issues that have come up. And as you may know, up until about 1995, there was no parking requirement in the downtown as opposed to other areas of the city. And in 1995, that changed. And in about 1997, the new option to buy out of the parking requirement in the downtown, which is called, as Adam described, and I hope you can explain it to me, the unmet parking need credit. That worked fairly well for the past 12, 13 years, but it got extremely complicated over time. And as part of the overall revision of the zoning ordinance, we completely revised that section. The unmet parking need credit was renamed as a parking payment in lieu of providing parking spaces. It focused on the downtown overlay district, which you adopted several years ago, instead of the entire CBA, CBB district, because the CBA district, or the central business districts, extended into some residential neighborhoods. It reduced the parking requirements across the board in the downtown area compared to other areas of the city, and it correspondingly increased the amount of the payment. And then on January 21st, the City Council referred to the Planning Board a request from Robert A. Shanes for reconsideration of that ordinance change, and in particular, the way it applied to restaurant uses. And the Planning Board reviewed that on February 18th and voted to recommend what's before you tonight, which they recommended as an interim reduction to $2,000 per space, and to create a focus group to provide the perspective of the downtown property owners and business persons. And that focus group has met twice, on March 2nd and April 1st, and is preparing a report to the Planning Board. And they expect to present this report in early May so the Planning Board can consider it at its meeting on May 20th. So that would be a report that would look beyond the current ordinance changes before you right now, the interim change to a more long-range solution. And I'd just like to to offer that there were four general questions that are really being considered. This particular ordinance change has to be considered in a broader context. And the first question is, should the city require property owners in the downtown to provide off-street parking spaces as it does for the rest of the city? It's one question that the downtown parking focus group is expected to consider in its report to the planning board. Many cities do not require any downtown properties to provide any parking. Other cities like Portsmouth have a parking requirement but provide a mechanism for property owners to buy out of it. And other cities require off-street parking with no buyout option. So that's kind of a first global kind of consideration. The second issue is, if property owners are required to provide off-street parking, should there be different requirements for different uses in the city? And that's really what is at the core of the request for reconsideration earlier. There is a logic for requiring different standards for different uses, because some standards have higher traffic generation or higher parking demand requirements. In Portsmouth's revised ordinance, we attempted to relax and simplify the parking demand rates as much as possible, but we left restaurant uses with a significantly higher requirement than other uses. The third issue is, if property owners are required to provide off-street parking, should the option of an in lieu parking payment be available? And my recommendation is yes, it should, because this takes advantage of the efficiencies in a downtown area where you can be much more efficient in providing parking in larger municipal facilities to serve a number of uses than the alternative is requiring each individual use to provide parking, and that really isn't good for the fabric of the downtown. And then the final issue is, if the payment option is available, what is the appropriate payment amount? The current payment of $5,000 per space that was adopted and became effective on January 1st is based on the concept that private developers would pay 50% of the cost of municipal parking facilities. But that's really an arbitrary target, and it could be any number. I would like to emphasize or to note that if we reduce it to $2,000 per space, many new buildings, if there were new buildings being developed in the city, would pay less than they would have last year before we changed the system. Even though the $2,000 is higher than the $1,306 that existed last year, because our parking requirements are so much lower, now the reduction to $2,000 per space would reduce the potential payments into the parking fund. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want you to be aware of that. So those are that's the background, facts, and outline of how we've gotten to where we are today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, at this point, we're at public hearing,
So we're going to have a public hearing. Okay, and just for the record, councilors, note that under Section 9 of the City Council agenda for this evening, after approvals of grants and donations, we'll be dealing with considerations of resolutions and ordinances, in which case this will be considered for potential second reading. With that, I seek to open the public hearing, and as I have said before, since the beginning of the year, we will call one round, meaning you have an opportunity to speak. You may speak as long as you wish. There is no time limit. However, I would respectfully ask that you consider your fellow speakers and their opportunity to speak as well. And there will be no second and third round of speaking. So if you have something to say, you'll want to say it in the first instance. The other request I make, given that we have two public hearings this evening, and as I typically ask, please make sure you queue up so that there's not a lot of dead time between speakers, so that we can move it right along and proceed through our agenda. And with that, I will open the public hearing and ask the first speaker to come forward on this item. Now, if the chief sits down, then I know. Okay. Anyone seeking to speak to this one? Sir? Please state your name and address for the record, and we'd be happy to hear your comments.
My name's Larry McManus. I live at 112 Gate Street in Portsmouth, and I own a piece of property downtown. I'm here. I thought Mr. Shanes would be here, but he's at another board meeting in another city. But I'd like to read a short letter that he wrote. It's regarding the parking impact fee. Dear Mayor Farini and members of the City Council, parking does not so much benefit downtown businesses as it does the citizens and visitors who want to be downtown. Viability of the downtown depends on vitalized businesses, including restaurants. To single out any class of business for a parking impact fee is counterproductive and just plain wrong. Vital businesses can pay rents or real estate taxes, which benefit every taxpayer in Portsmouth. Parking is a revenue-producing business for the city. If the central business district is to remain a revenue producer for the city, it must remain vitalized with businesses that want to come. There are numerous vacancies in first-floor storefronts and upper-story office space in Portsmouth. To exact a penalty in the guise of an illegal and unconstitutional impact fee on new restaurants is simply beyond any rational explanation. Downtown businesses are the cogs in the wheel of municipal prosperity. And then, including in this is, not in his letter, but a study that was done by the Consulting Engineers Group for the city back in 2006, November 16th, 2006, and it was addressed to the parking manager, City of Portsmouth, Mr. John Frederick. The study mentions that the one business that has the biggest impact on parking in the city is a music hall, which represents a single generator of potential garage transient customers. With a seating capacity of 900, one can assume that a capacity crowd at the music hall will generate about 300 vehicles downtown, which is more than any restaurant. And it further states that parking is infrastructure and should be regarded as infrastructure, not charge an impact fee. That's my only comment. That's not in the report. And one of the other things, just as an aside, a personal aside, and I mentioned this before at a parking committee hearing. I was down in New Bedford not too long ago. And, you know, there's a real parking problem down there. And it's not the number of cars that come downtown. There are no cars that come downtown because all the first floor, second floor, you know, whole buildings are vacant down there. So there's no problem with, you know, getting a parking space. In fact, they've taken out some of the meters downtown, which leads me to another comment that if you're going to put meters down on Parrott Avenue, I think you should put, as a gesture, meters right here at City Hall in the two lots up back here in the lot right in front of City Hall. I'd rather see that rather than, you know, any impact fees of $2,000, $3,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? And we'll make sure, Mr. McManus, did you care to submit that letter for the record? Because I do believe I was provided a copy with that, and we'll submit this letter if you also want to submit that study. I'm saying I do have a copy of the letter, so I can put it into the record. But if that's fine, it's a city one that we can take notice of. Yeah. Thank you very much. So we have that. People may inspect that if they wish. You've heard it read into the record. Further discussion, further people to speak on this particular public hearing. I'm going to ask one more time. Anyone care to rise and speak? Okay, seeing no one rise to speak, I'm going to close the public hearing. Next is a public hearing regarding an ordinance deleting Chapter 11, Article 3, Section 11.310, construction work requiring uniformed policemen, and Section 11.311, penalty for noncompliance, and adopt new provision, Chapter 8, Article 6, construction work required certified flag personnel. Remember that this also is going to be under item 9, now in this case B of your agenda, where we will be looking at second reading. So in the first instance, does anyone care to comment or come forward before we begin? Yes.
As the City Council requested at the last meeting, I've asked that Steve Parkinson make a short presentation along with the Police Chief, David Ferlin.
Thank you.
Mayor Farini, members of the City Council, Steve Parkinson, Public Works Director. I have supplied the City Council this evening with some additional information that I think is important for the Council to read when they get an opportunity, because it is in reference to the proposed ordinance before you. First is Chapter 6E, Flagger Control, from the 2009 edition of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, better known as the MUTCD Manual. This manual is administered by the Federal Highway Administration and has been in existence since the first publication in 1935. Since that time, it has been revised 10 times to the current edition, which is 2009. The manual is recognized as the national standard for all traffic control devices such as signs, signals, markings, and other devices used to regulate, warn, or guide traffic placed on, over, or adjacent to a city street, pedestrian facility, bikeway, private road open to public travel by authority of a public agency or official having jurisdiction. All that being said, it is the rule book for everything to deal with streets and highways. This particular chapter I have supplied you this evening is specific to the qualifications and deployment of flaggers in control of traffic through work zones. It covers required training, safety apparel and equipment to be utilized, as well as the proper usage of that equipment. Other sections of Chapter 6, which I didn't bother printing because it's about another inch of paper, address the proper setup of work zones for safe movement of vehicles and pedestrians utilizing signs, cones, barricades, and other warning devices. The second piece of information I gave you, which is a one-sheet, is the New Hampshire Department of Transportation policy on flagger and uniformed officer use in work zones. That policy addresses the use of flaggers as the primary means for providing dynamic, temporary traffic control operations in work zones. Uniformed officers may be utilized for their specific authority for operations beyond that of a flagger, such as assistance in speed control and traffic law enforcement on an as-necessary basis. The purpose of the policy is to provide a safe work zone through the prudent and consistent use of flaggers and/or uniformed officers in dynamic traffic control operations and traffic enforcement. The third piece of information I gave you is the New Hampshire DOT flagger and uniformed officer use in work zones guidelines. The goal of these guidelines is to reduce the likelihood of injuries and fatalities to workers and road users in work zones while maintaining a fiscally responsible approach in their use. These guidelines provide parameters to identify the appropriate need and consistent use of flaggers and uniformed officers. As with the MUTCD manual, these guidelines address the proper training requirements for both flaggers and uniformed officers to conduct traffic control operations. In dealing with training, the American Traffic Safety Services Association is the primary organization providing flagger certification classes nationwide based upon the requirements found within the MUTCD manual. The main purpose of this course that is taught is to train flaggers to provide safe passage of traffic through and around work zones and to minimize confusion by bringing standard flagging procedures to our nation's highways. Participants are required to pass the ATSSA test, which is the American Traffic Safety Services Association written exam, upon completion of the course to become certified flaggers. This certification is standard nationwide, with some states requiring enhanced requirements unique to that state. These classes are offered a number of times throughout the year by various organizations such as the Associated General Contractors, as well as the University of New Hampshire Technology Transfer Center. In the proposed ordinance before you, the Public Works Department will develop a permit process to administer the flagger program for any actions that require the interruption of vehicles or pedestrians along streets or right-of-way of the City of Portsmouth. Criteria will be developed along the lines of the MUTC manual as well as the New Hampshire DOT guidelines. Included within the permit process will be requirements for training, certification, safety apparel and equipment, traffic control plans, conformance with other applicable sections of the MUTCD manual dealing with temporary traffic control such as signage and lane closure requirements. In closing, it's important to keep in mind that the ultimate goal of this ordinance or any ordinance dealing with traffic control is to provide a safe, efficient, and secure work zone for vehicles, pedestrians, and workers on an equal basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Steve at this time? Well, it's a public hearing, so we won't be having questions. We could do that when the motion is pending. Do we have any further presentation from the Police Commissioner or Chief?
Good evening. I'm getting a little older, so I need my glasses, so pardon me. Happy Easter, and thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. The first thing I want to point out is that in front of you, you should have an amendment. The amendment has been modified, and this is as a result of the meeting that the Director of Public Works, Steve Parkinson, and the City Attorney and I had last week. For example, the provision that had the gas lines as a requirement of the Police Commission's amendment has been deleted. The reason for that is almost every area in Portsmouth, except for the Woodlands, has a gas line buried beneath it. So the Commission felt that in order for them to be able to clarify the existing ordinance, that would not clarify it anymore. It would probably continue to keep it cloudy, meaning that it could be interpreted that any road was going to require a police officer because there was a gas line there. It was also discussed that it's not the gas company that historically breaks the gas lines anyway. It's usually the other companies that break the gas lines. So that would further complicate and cloudy the originally proposed Police Commission's amendment. The other part that you see that's deleted is the state roads have been deleted. That's because state roads will not have to go through the city permitting process because it is a state road, so they would be exempt from going through the city permitting process. So in order, again, to clarify the Police Commission's amendment, they deleted that for clarification. The list of streets has been changed, and this was with the input of Director Parkinson and the City Attorney, to add a few streets out at Pease because of the volume of traffic. Again, the decision matrix to come up with the streets that the Police Commission has identified in their amendment was traffic volume. And then it would add the Chief of Police as a logical extension of the Public Safety Authority and responsibility, so it would be either the Director of Public Works or the Police Chief that would assign out these public work jobs. Our research, when we left the meeting, there were some questions that we had that required additional research, which I'm here to provide for you as well. And I've also heard from some of you as well on some questions that I hope to answer in this presentation. First off, the review of becoming a certified flagger. How does one become a flagger? So basically, as the companies explained to me, the person applies. I do caution you that there is no background check on this person that applies. There's no psychological checks. There's no sex offender registry checks. The certification course is between 3 and 5 hours long. There's no field training required. The approximate pay for a flagger, what the flagger is actually getting in their pocket, is $9 an hour. The approximate cost to hire a flagger for the city would be $25 an hour at a 4-hour minimum, with additional costs for after hours, nighttime, and weekend jobs. The person can simply walk off the job if they want to because there's no basic accountability. They can just simply leave. And one of the concerns that we had at that meeting that we need to have clarification on was what steps will be taken to ensure that the person that's actually at the construction site is a certified flagger at all the job sites. What is going to be the oversight process, and how much will that oversight process cost to the city? One of the problems we found historically and with neighboring communities that utilize flaggers is that they frequently divert cars into neighborhoods that often cannot accommodate the traffic. Few are from Portsmouth. Few of the flaggers are from Portsmouth, understand the traffic patterns or care about how traffic is being diverted, other than their desire to simply move the cars off of the construction zone. And there are now stories coming out of Massachusetts how Massachusetts got rid of the police officer requirement at job sites and has flaggers. And there's now stories coming out of Massachusetts that the flagger rates are actually costing more per hour than the police officer rates. And the logic behind that, or the theory behind that, is once the law came off the books, then there was no other police officer requirement on the books, and the city flaggers and the flaggers started raising their rates up. I think what it shows is that this issue came up 3 weeks ago, and I think it's clouded with emotion. For example, the Portsmouth Herald has already chimed in with an opinion, and they haven't even heard any of the facts from the public hearing yet. I know that they haven't asked us, the police department, for any facts or figures before they came out with their editorial. My point again is that some of this is being pushed by emotion. What is needed is statesmanship on such a huge policy decision, and not something that should be decided upon with emotion and perception. Some of you have asked about the history of the ordinance, which was signed in 1984, and that took some work to do. But it dates back to 1984, when there was a construction company called Midway Construction out of Hampton that was doing a job on Farm Lane when they were putting in the fisheries building out there and Woodbury Avenue. And then Councilor McMaster received some complaints and personally went down and viewed the construction area on Farm Lane. And he asked then Assistant City Attorney Jim Flynn to draft language after they find problems at the construction zone with speeding trucks, load spillage, ignoring the speed stop signs, trucks being diverted into the neighborhoods, damage to the side street pavement from the heavy trucks, inexperienced flaggers, and dust problems. So Assistant City Attorney Jim Flynn put in a permitting process and a provision whereas the city engineer would outline the traffic safety plan and the flag people required. However, actually, I found that Steve was publicly against having the city engineer do that permitting process or those plans. Steve suggested at the time that it be worded directly in the ordinance when a police officer would be required. That's how that wording was inserted into the current ordinance. The wording, along with Councilor McMaster's request to add water and gas jobs as a critical utility job, was ultimately included in the final passage of the ordinance. It was passed with no news coverage and didn't seem to have any public input whatsoever, according to city records. The ordinance in place does not require police officers at all jobs, though many companies do hire police officers. Now, this may be perhaps from habit, custom, misinformation, which the PC, with the police commissioner amendment, seeks to clarify. I anticipate morale and legal implications from the unions that will distract us away from our mission. It might significantly affect the labor relations that we have with our emergency first responders and investigators. If the outside work goes away, it will also affect the number, quality, and retention of our highly educated police officers who need this income to make their ends meet. Many have advanced degrees and skills that are attractive and being currently courted by the federal government and private defense contractors. I think it's important to remember that it costs about $46,000 to train and get our first police officer call out of that trainee. Some of you have asked for surrounding communities' experiences with flaggers. So I put out to the chiefs of police in New Hampshire a request if they had any stories pro or against flaggers, and this is what had come back to me. I heard recently from the Kensington police chief who told me that a flagger working a busy street allowed a pretty jogger to pass in front of him and caused a traffic accident. I heard from the chief of Thornton, who was related when he worked for Conway. They arrested the flagger on his lunch break for DWI and operating after suspension. There's a published article out of Oxford, Mass. Of arresting their flag person for marijuana trafficking. There's many stories. I'm not going to bore you with them. I'm sure you know where I'm heading with those. But the point is clear that in matters of public safety, you are best served with your police officers. The police officer is your best source for public safety. There is accountability, there's training, there are employment ramifications for misconduct. Police officer does something wrong at a traffic site, there's ramifications for that. Blue lights slow people down, amber lights do not. Flaggers do not command the respect or level of authority from the public that the police do. I think we need to safeguard leaving public safety in the hands of a construction company that is concerned with the bottom profit line, that hires a company that is also concerned about the bottom profit line. I just want to make sure that public safety comes into that equation. I think the Police Commission amendment takes all those things into consideration and addresses the issue of construction zone safety with public safety in mind. I think it's a clarification of the intent of what the 1984 ordinance sought to do. I think this amendment does that. The Police Commission amendment makes good clarification, lowers the amount of exposure to the city for officers making outside work dollars, and yet provides good public safety on our major roads. It will also allow us to combine our efforts towards making state refinements, which is where our efforts should be focused. Remember, having an officer on a detail makes for good traffic safety, as well as a force multiplier of the police officers working the city. On any given day, there's 5 extra police officers working out there that are paid for by the construction companies. There are many stories to be told how a detail officer with direct communications to police headquarters was the one to catch our criminal that we were looking for. You know this. There are stories of how the police officer has rendered immediate first aid to a passerby, something flaggers are not trained in. Police officers are trained and can respond to road rage problems from people who are forced to wait in traffic, making them late for their important appointment. Flaggers are not trained in this. The police are also able to know that fire trucks or ambulances will be coming soon and make provisions to make sure that roadway has safe passage for them. Many stories, you know, I'm not going to bore you with them. You know this is true, and these are all stories that will go away if we completely ban the flaggers from the construction zones. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Chief. If Chairman, do you care to speak? Please do.
Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, Gerald Howe, 45 Miller Ave, also Chair of the Police Commission. The Police Commissioners reviewed the ordinance change offered by Councilor Spear. We looked at it and we have responded, and we hope that the Council will take due consideration of the amendment that we have proffered to the Council and consider public safety in the city for its residents, its citizens, and its visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Howe. With that appears to close the presentations, remembering councilors that we'll be acting on another portion of the agenda to actually vote on the ordinance. And at that time, if questions need to be asked by councilors, staff members, police, et cetera here, questions can be answered. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing, and same rules as I described previously, but once again, you'll have one opportunity to speak. You may speak as long as you like. And I would ask that you only consider the fellow speakers that will be before us this evening in terms of management of time. I would also ask that you state your name and address for the record, and that you try to move along quickly once you've got one person up there, that a few people are queued up or at least in the chairs out front so you're ready to go, and we can proceed with some dispatch. And with that, I'd like to open the public hearing and ask our first speaker to come forward.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Graham. My wife and I own a company called New England Traffic Control Services. Since 1987...
Would you state your address, please, in the town that you're from?
158 or 332 Kelly Street, Manchester.
Thank you.
Since 1987, we've been providing traffic control services throughout New Hampshire. Every day we employ about 100 flaggers working at utility sites with utility companies such as Public Service, National Grid, Unitil, Nuco, just to name a few. For 23 years, we've worked with National Grid in cities such as Nashua, Concord, Tilton. So to say the use of civilian flaggers near gas and pipelines would put civilians at risk, I would say is false. I've recently heard, of course, the chief's statements. We've worked around the clock during the days and weeks in all New Hampshire communities and cities during the recent floods, ice storms, and windstorms without incident. So to say that civilian flaggers can't work at night or on certain roads or would be unsafe in certain towns, I feel would be false. Really, the vote would create jobs in New Hampshire. It's going to create opportunities to employ people in Portsmouth, in New Hampshire. It can be done safely. We've been doing it since 1987 throughout New Hampshire, throughout Maine, throughout Vermont, using certified flaggers through ATSA. Some of the other things, with Massachusetts has a going rate wage, which insists that we have to use $35 an hour as a wage for flaggers. That's how that wage is set. And that's why flagging hasn't really taken off too much in Massachusetts. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please. Does anyone care to rise and speak? Please come forward. If others care to speak, please bear in mind that you'll be after this individual. Sir?
Yes, my name is Jim Tao. I live at 3 Stone Ledge Drive in Northampton. I work for a local contractor, and I've been working in the streets of Portsmouth off and on a little over 20 years. I've had a lot of different situations. I've used a lot of flaggers. I've used a lot of police officers. Just last year, most recent job, I was working up on 108 in Somersworth, highly traveled road, straightforward, not a lot of side roads. And I had a flagging company there, and it just didn't work. It took up most of my time dealing with the flaggers and what have you. Towards the end of the job, we had some road crossings to do, and I got one officer, no cruiser. He's standing there, traffic just slowed right down. On the other hand, I've had officers, not all officers do exactly what they're supposed to do. Some of them, they drift off, but they're few and far between. I find that if I'm on a less traveled road, I'm just as well off with flaggers. But on any main roads, anytime you have to cross a road or anything of that nature, I prefer to have an officer, number one, for safety. Number two is, I've seen it several times, you hear an ambulance coming, or sirens. The flaggers, the first thing they do is stop traffic both lanes. What's that do? That stops the emergency vehicle. You have to be able to see which way it's coming. The flaggers have to know to keep that lane flowing. It doesn't happen. They get excited and they stop. I'm not saying all flaggers are like that, but the experience I've had with them, they are. Like I said, the side roads, or if you can close the road off, it's fine. But just having an officer on a major road, the pedestrians, they'll listen to them. It was brought up earlier about people waiting in traffic. They, at times, give officers a hard time. A young girl or a young boy that's flagging don't stand a chance. They don't stand a chance. So I'm for using flaggers, but in the right place, not on a main road or a busy intersection or anything of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please. Does anyone care to rise and speak?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Tim Black. I live at 13 Witham Farm Road in Greenland, New Hampshire, and I'm also the president of the Portsmouth Police Local 11 Union. I won't reiterate what the chief said regarding the historical background of why this ordinance came into place. I'd quickly like to comment on the last speaker's presentation as a contractor. It was brought to our attention that there were many contractors that work on a daily basis throughout the city that seem to share the same sentiments, but weren't able to make it this evening. I'd specifically like to address what's been referred to frequently by members of the council as the potential for this 125 bill and the potential liability that the numbers were given of $5 million to the city. With all due respect, I feel that those numbers are inaccurate. I feel that they're incomplete. With the numbers that I have, hard numbers, using the New Hampshire Retirement Systems calculator, I haven't been able to come close to duplicating those. But even if there were a large liability, I think that it's misplaced. I don't think the outside details and these road jobs dovetail at all with this liability that's been spoken of. The reason being is you can't eliminate that $5 million liability if you eliminated road jobs tomorrow. That would still be here. Because those officers have already earned that. It wouldn't be eliminated. So let's move forward as to the future and the possible liabilities. Well, again, I wasn't even able to come close to the numbers that were presented to you. What I can tell you is that some of the larger problems do not come from the outside work. They're related to the large buybacks of some of our senior veteran officers from contracts of the past. These were negotiated at the table, and these included large buybacks for vacation time, sick time, and allow these officers to use these to bump their last 3 years. Now, the union and the city worked very hard together to negotiate these out to eliminate this liability for the city. That was done at the negotiation table. We have currently 2 officers in our union, 2, with unlimited buyback potential at this time, and they've both put in their papers. City saw this by coming up with a leave of termination account, knowing that there was a sunset on that when these officers retired, and that eventually this problem, or so-called liability, will be eliminated. After 1998, no officer, which is 75% of our officers, has any ability to buy back any sick time. Any. I don't think the city has yet to feel the benefit of that proactive agreement between the union and the city. Now, the 125 bill that is projected or has been presented has been postponed, I think, for a reason. Since 2007, it hasn't been enacted yet, and it's soon or most likely going to be tabled again and postponed. And I think that the council members that have researched this would agree that there's a high likelihood that this bill will never go into effect. And the city will not face any liability regarding this bill. Now, it's pure speculation at this point, but I think it's a pretty good educated guess. Again, the outside work, the outside details, there's a misconception, I think, or we've heard some people speak as to what the additional costs are for the city of officers who are working these outside details. The city pays retirement and medical whether the officer works 40 or 60. There's no difference in the change. Seems to be some confusion about this outside work extra cost. It's not there. City makes between $6 and $14 an hour for an admin fee, which goes into the general fund. Now, again, this issue was addressed some 25 years ago with 6 good months of research by the Traffic and Safety Commission. They identified a problem, they researched it, and they came up with a good resolution and a conclusion. And that was as the ordinance stands today. What I am fearful of is an emotional decision based upon fear of a bill that most likely won't be enacted. By removing, the Portsmouth Police Union does not take the position that police are needed in every corner of every side street. But by removing and making a blanket removal of the power from the Chief of Police and replacing officers with flaggers, I think the council risks putting the city and the citizens and the safety of the streets back where they were 25 years ago. Because it's not a problem until it's a problem. And the problem was found 25 years ago. There was an issue. There were flaggers at that time. They came up with a decent resolution. And I'd hate to see us take a step backwards and specifically over a bill, again, that may not go into effect, but the fear is heightened about what I consider, using numbers that I have, are inaccurate and inflated estimations. The union takes a proactive approach in doing our research and doing our homework. And we urge you to do the same before we make a decision. If you take a look at the real numbers, take a look at the true financial impact about actually eliminating the details would do, I think you'd be surprised. And I don't think they're consistent with the numbers that have been presented before you as estimations. And if they are, if my numbers are wrong, I'll be the first to admit it. But I open the offer to any of you that would like to sit down with the numbers that I have using the New Hampshire retirement system calculator and find out what the true liability is for the city. Discuss the contracts, how they've changed since I think it was 84 or 82, when the elimination of full buyback potential was eliminated now in 1998, where officers, again, from 1998 have no buyback potential. But the offer is open. But again, please hope, as Chief Ferland to put it, you make a decision not based on emotion, but based on the facts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Dave Keaveney. I live at 49 Wilson Road in Elwyn Park. I am employed by the City of Portsmouth as a police officer. I'm a sergeant. I wanted to speak not so much with the numbers, but more kind of as a resident and why I came to the city. Being a younger officer when I came here, knowing about the job itself and where the city is, I wanted to live here. I wanted to work here. Now looking back, knowing how expensive it is to raise a family here, and knowing kind of where a lot of jobs are going, it's difficult sometimes to make ends meet. And I'm not saying we have it tough, because we have it probably a lot better off than most people. So we're very fortunate to have a job and to have children and to raise children in a city like this. What I did want to touch on, the Chief and Officer Black had mentioned, is we are in a tough economy. With that said, seeing the potential new officers coming through, you would think that given the job market, we would have a lot. It's surprising how many people did not come out to try to work over here. And I think part of that is because surrounding towns and surrounding agencies basically pay more. I know a particular incident of an officer who came through the process here is now in Dover, has been for probably almost 4 years, and is making more than I am as a sergeant. So with the addition of the working the outside jobs, and believe me, I don't like working road jobs. I do from time to time. And I'm not here to say that, well, you need to pay the officers the money just so they stay or just so they come here. But part of that is getting a pool of decent officers that have that that benefit of being able to work a little bit of extra time to make a little bit extra money. Now, talking briefly about the retirement problem, it's clear that there's an issue with the retirement system. It's being addressed on a state level. I know there's a lot of lawsuits going on. And I know that's something eventually is going to have to be fixed, and it's going to be fixed at the state level. Now, with that said, from personal experience, I know last year every year we hold a retirement party from our dues from the police department. It's not a city thing. We don't pay, it's not a taxpayer thing. 4 out of the 5 officers that retired last year, in their last 3 years, didn't work a road job. So it's not strictly something that every officer's out there working road jobs and just trying to make a buck. Believe me, I don't think any of us got in this job to work road jobs. I certainly didn't. Now, with that said, I know Officer Black talked about the buyout in '98. That's not something that we're going to get. So maybe that'll be different down the road when it comes time for me to retire. I'm going to have to look at other things to do. But I think we have a short-term memory with currently in the winter times. Obviously, it's a little slower with the tourism, with the road jobs, with the construction. But when you start to get this type of warm weather, I know we all drive around town and you see the amount of jobs going on, the amount of people here, and just the amount of congestion sometimes that brings. And when you talk about flagging or holding a stick and saying stop, go, sometimes that works fine. You're on a street where it's down to 1 lane, but the city of Portsmouth, it's not built on a grid. It's not a lot of, it's not a laid out where someone planned the whole city in one day. It was, kind of built on top of different streets going one way or the other, different, that's what makes it so unique. I'm not saying we're out here and this is some type of, we need a master's degree to direct traffic, but certainly there's days where you earn your money out there. watching for bicyclists, you're watching for moms pushing strollers or dads, like myself, pushing a stroller, and you're dealing with traffic. So it's not just a matter of flagging, it's a matter of directing traffic and public safety. So I want you to, and I just feel as reading this through the papers so much, it's moving so very fast. I know you guys have done your homework. The chief obviously has done his. And there's numbers and there's crunching, but it comes down to a matter of public safety. I just don't see how you could take and say police officers are not allowed to direct traffic in the city of Portsmouth. It doesn't make sense to me. But I'd like to thank you for your time. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please. Does anyone care to rise and speak?
Yes, my name is James Kokenauer. I live at 150 Newcastle Avenue. I'm just going to bring 3 points out that you should think about seriously. For 34 years, I worked for the city of Portsmouth on a fire truck. We could go to a scene, get off a truck, nobody stops for us. But a police officer shows up, the intimidation, they'll stop. Flaggers, unfortunately, whether it's right or wrong, are going to be treated like mall cops. Nobody's going to care. If you think that's not true, drive down the highway. When you got signs out there, it says fines double in construction. Unless you see a blue light, nobody slows down. If you don't see a police officer, you won't slow down. And that's unfortunate for the city of Portsmouth. You can't put people in danger because we want to cut costs. And the fact of a police officer is intimidating, whether you like them or not, or you don't want to pay them or not, that's not the fact. The fact is the intimidation has to be there, or nobody's going to pay attention to them. You could have 5 flaggers out there, and all be wearing the same gear. They could all work for the city of Portsmouth, Public Works, Fire Department. It could be any one of you guys. If you don't think so, put a vest on, go out there and see if they pay attention to you. Try to stop a car coming down a construction site when they know it's not a police officer. They're not going to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please. Does anyone else care to speak? Again, respectfully ask that if you wish to speak, that you continue in order behind each other. Thanks. If you please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Bill St. Laurent, 253 Colonial Drive. I have a nasal problem from the allergies of our beautiful weather, so excuse if you don't understand everything I'm saying here. Having been a counselor, having been uniquely tied with the city in many instances, I was always under the impression that you needed to have a policeman for these traffic details. I don't know where that perception came from, but every time you saw a detail, there was a police officer. I didn't view that bad or good, but I thought, gee, they have a monopoly, because there are some instances where there's simple construction things going on, and all they would need is a flagger. But I never looked into it because I just figured that it was a good idea to have a policeman there. But I'm glad to see that this is coming out in the open now, that the perception is changing, and that there's a possibility that if it's only needed, if a flagger is only needed, that's fine. If a policeman's needed, that's great too. I think the perception here, if I'm not mistaken, it goes with the idea that a lot of people think and know that the monies that are made on these overtime goes into the retirement system, enlarges the retirement system for the individual officer. And I think that's where the whole perception is coming to a head here. This has been on and off mentioned through the years, and I'm glad to see something maybe is being done about it. I'm not sure whether I understand Mr. Black in stating that that was on the contracts to remove that type of situation, But I think that's what should be centered on. I think this is a good time. You have the contracts here, and maybe that's something that the policemen's union would negotiate about. That there has to be some perception here that the monies that they make, and I don't want anybody to lose any overtime money. If you're a police officer and you can make overtime on these details, good for you. I'm glad for you. But it should be that one-time deal. It shouldn't be something that's going to add and cost the taxpayer in the future because a police officer does this detail and increases his retirement. So now the retirement that he makes when he retires, say at $50,000 or $60,000 a year, stays that way because he's put so much overtime in flagging. That's not fair to the taxpayer to have his retirement increase because of this. This is a part-time detail. Shouldn't be considered an overtime. And I think that's where this whole perception came from. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think something's being done. I'm glad to see something's being done finally. And I think that's where it should be centered on the fact that this money that they make should not be part of should not be used to increase their eventual retirement. That's what I'm seeing with this. So it looks like it's being worked on, and I commend you all, both police and city council, for working on, and the police commission for working on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Further speakers regarding this issue? Further speakers in the public hearing, please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. My name is Evan Bonton, and I live at 1305 Piscasset Street in Newmarket, New Hampshire. I'm not a Portsmouth resident, but I'm here just, on behalf of the police officers and also the flaggers, because I started a company to address public safety more than anything else. And as much as this is a financial issue, but also there's a big safety issue. The company that I started was to hopefully eliminate a lot of deaths that happened at traffic details. You may or may not know this, but in the U.S., they have over 300 officers that die each year doing traffic detail. Now, when you take the flaggers, it's even more than that. Over 720 of them die each year doing traffic detail. In addition to this, besides that, you have a lot of injuries. From that, you have people who become permanently disabled. So, yes, there is a cost component to people trying to earn a living, but at the end of the day, think of the impact of the injuries or the death that occur of people who are trained to manage traffic and still getting hit from distracted drivers. I know New Hampshire have not experienced any deaths, but Vermont last December, a firefighter died trying to manage traffic during an incident. And also in Massachusetts in December as well, you have people who died when the driver went off the road and killed, I believe, 3 people, and one of them was from New Hampshire. So as you're making your decisions, one of the things that you have to think about as well is just the safety of the people who are trying to provide a good service for the city of Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else care to speak to the public hearing? If you please step right up.
Good evening. My name is Eric Anderson, 38 Georges Terrace, Portsmouth. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I wrote up some notes. I pretty much scratched them out. There's just been a lot of information here prior to, during the course of the public comments, prior to with some of the presentations. And I guess I would reflect it to be that it's very hard to rebut some of the safety issues. They are apparent. They're concise, and I think they should, they definitely have a consideration in your decision. And, to rebut some of the things that the chief said, I was informed more at this prior to me getting up, which made me just scratch my notes out. But I still have to reflect that there is that this whole issue was brought forward because there has been some fiscal implications. And I think there's some validity to that. That can't not be ignored either. It appears to be that there's some type of compromise in the works that would try and incorporate the Public Works when the situation, warrants it. I don't, have anything against, individuals in the police department working a detail to gain extra revenue. But I think I'm still quite confused from what I've heard with some of the comments here to say there is no fiscal implication, in the retirement program. I've heard contrary to that from, some of the other information that's been out there. So I'm relatively confused to know that there is or isn't. But if there is, I think it is an issue that has to be addressed. And I've heard, conflicting reports of what is or isn't, the real fiscal implication of this issue, because it is a component of the discussion, and I think that you still have to reflect that in your decision. I guess I only read the amendments that were provided, through the newspaper today, and I guess those have been revised and submitted again to you for consideration, and I think those have changed. So I really wasn't coming up here with full knowledge of any adjustments that have been made in the amendments that have been previously discussed. There was a projection that the chief made that 60% of the cost of police, or 60% of the police details would be reduced. And I'm not going to, question that, or there's no malice with that or criticism with that, but I'm just not sure that how predictable is that over the course of time when you don't know what the capital or construction jobs are going to be throughout the city. So again, I don't have, or probably neither do you, to have the ability to forecast out in a 5-year period whether 90% of the construction or capital improvement, jobs or jobs that require a police detail are going to be taking place in the roadways that have been designated for police details. I guess that would be my comments. I know there is a component of emotion to this issue, but leave the emotion aside to some respects. There is a safety issue that has to be addressed, and there is definitely a fiscal issue here that has to be addressed. And I hope you have enough information to make the decision. I don't, because it seems to be evolving and there seems to be some confliction with opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers this evening? Please come forward. Once again, I would ask that you bear in mind that as one speaker appears to be finishing, if you wish to speak as well, to get ready to go. Thanks, sir.
Good evening. My name is John Connors. I live at 24 Shaw Road, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was going to come here just as more of a support, and I wasn't going to speak, but after listening to some of the things being said, I thought I'd come up and say a few words. First of all, everybody's saying how much money they made. I can remember when I started, which was more than 10 years before this ordinance was even passed, I was making $3 and something an hour. So everybody's talking about big money. I worked for $3 and something an hour, okay? And before the ordinance was passed, when we did construction sites, I can remember if you went out South Street and took a left at the lights at Lafayette, you could go from there to Northampton and hit one set of lights. There was no traffic lights. You go out Woodbury Avenue, because there was no Market Street, you'd hit the lights at Granite Street, you wouldn't hit any more lights until you got to Dover, okay? So there wasn't anything. There was no malls, there was no, nothing like that. And people talk about traveling around the state, seeing all the flaggers. You can go to Greenland, Newington, Newcastle, all of these surrounding towns. I just took a couple of notes. Newington, you've probably got 3 sets of traffic lights all on one road. Greenland, 3 traffic lights. Rye, 2. Newcastle, none, okay? You can go down the Central Business District in downtown Portsmouth and have more sets of traffic lights than you have in a 20-mile radius, okay? We've got 15 sets of traffic lights just downtown. That's more than the whole seacoast, okay? That's where you need traffic control, okay? That's what traffic lights do. You can stand on Woodbury Avenue and in some spots and stand in one place and look and see 5 sets of traffic lights. You can't do that. That's more than most towns in the surrounding towns around here. Okay? They also talk about money.
it's funny because whenever we'd get jobs coming into the station, they'd all say, well, is this a city job or outside? You know, we all had to differentiate between city jobs, okay? Portsmouth police officers were the only ones that could work city jobs. Why? The Portsmouth police officers are the lowest paid. Newington, Greenland, Northampton, all these other towns that came to Portsmouth, they make more than the Portsmouth officers, okay? You know, it's a lot of things like that, okay? You know, I talk to these construction workers. They come from all over New England, you know, to work these different jobs, and they can't believe the construction in Portsmouth. They said, you guys have more construction in Portsmouth than they do in Portland, Manchester, down as far as Boston. You take a ride down State Street, what that project is going to look like. You got the two new condominium projects on State Street, you know, which the builders is doing for Old Port. You got the Pier 2 condos. You got the new condos on the top of Harbor Place. You go around the corner, you've got Reese Construction. You got the Bow Street, Seary Street job. We got another job that's being planned for Market Street that's going to go all the way to Russell Street. You got the Port Walk. And, you know, it just keeps on going to the Portsmouth Herald. Okay, that's where you need traffic control. I remember one meeting Mr. Coviello mentioned about, you know, downtown. You know, there's so much pedestrian traffic, there's more people walking than there is cars. We should have policemen down there doing pedestrian traffic. You know, and I can go on, and you know, just, you know, repeat a lot of the things that some of the other guys said, but I just felt I'd come up and, you know, say something. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Dan Ellis. I live at 5 Suzanne Drive. I'm captain. I'm in charge of the auxiliaries. I just want to make it clear that not every officer out there is getting paid to put money towards his retirement. Because I have retirees that work for me. He wears the same uniform as a full-time officer. None of his money goes to his retirement. If he gets $100 a month for his retirement, he can work 1,000 hours a month out there, and not a dime of it goes to his retirement. So a lot of people ride around. I've seen it in the papers. I've heard it. People think that every officer out there is in a uniform, gets paid, and is participating in putting money into his retirement. They're not. This is something you have to look at. I put probably, on an average, 8 guys, 10 guys. I have people that take time off from the regular job. I work full-time at shipyard. I take time off. You got to remember, 4th of July takes 30 officers. That's a minimum. For the amount of people that we have here, you're not going to put flagmen out there. Okay? Market Square Day. I've been doing that since it started. The first year I did it, I didn't run it. From that point on, I ran it. I set up all the traffic details. We've cut it back, but it's just safety. People come in. I got commended every year for Market Square Day just because I have a police officer on a street corner that can tell somebody where there's a nice restaurant, how to get out of town, how to get around town, how to avoid that road race. And everybody said it. Last year we had a lot of trouble out there because people do not know where to go when there's a road race. You'll be surprised how many people, including probably some of you, that if you go down a road because you do it every single day, you don't know an alternate route. Okay? And it's that police officer that's standing there that's going to be able to tell you how to get to an alternate route. A flagman's not. John that was just here was talking to 2 flagmen today. He was lucky he knew where he was on Bartlett Street. Okay? Somebody asked him where State Street or Islington, he probably couldn't even tell them. So I think on safety-wise, you need a police officer out there. Maybe not in every single street, not every single job, but just please remember, public safety is what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers this evening? If so, please come forward. Does anyone else care to speak? I'll ask one more time if anyone cares to speak. And if no one rises, I'm going to close the public hearing. We'll close the public hearing. And at this time, I'd ask Council, what's your pleasure? We have before us a very brief portion of the agenda, and then we have one item on an ordinance for second reading, and then we have this item. if people are comfortable going right through that, we can, rather than suspending the rules, but after that, we'll probably take a recess. Council Coviello.
I was going to suggest we jump right to the 9B.
Okay, he's got a motion. Okay.
I'll second that, please, if you need a second.
Motion to suspend. We have a second. We understand the purpose. Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. So let's go forward. So before us, we now are at item 9B of the agenda, and we're going to need a motion.
Your Honor, I make a motion to adopt second reading of the proposed ordinance as submitted and schedule a third and final reading at the April 19th City Council meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Discussion. Council Smith.
Thank you. There's so much with this issue. First of all, again, last time when we brought it up, and in light of the information that was given us today by the deputy, by Steve Parkinson, I still think this should be going to the Traffic and Safety Committee because this is ultimately about a safety issue. It's not a budget issue. Public safety should be the #1 reason why we're looking at this. I really think we have to take the time to consider the comments that have been given to us by the Police Commission. There's reasons why this law was put in place, and that's because the accidents that have occurred. But even, and just very briefly reading through the guidelines from the state of New Hampshire itself, it talks about having police officers in unsafe situations, to include making sure they have police officers at night. And I haven't even fully read this. It's just given to us. It can't just be about a budget issue because we have been, as was just mentioned, it's not an overtime issue, and it's not a budget issue for every one of the police officers that are doing the details because they're already retired. And they do not have to have a police officer at every single site. I'm also very concerned about one of the sentences that has been taken out that is not in the Police Commission's recommendation, is the one about if the traffic light itself is disabled, which is currently in the ordinance, then a police officer should be there. If one person gets hurt, the lawsuit that will come down upon this city completely outweighs whatever monetary value we're trying to save when we just have a couple of officers that are still at that higher pinnacle when they get the buyout that's going to affect this 125 law, assuming it even takes place. Some of these construction companies hire police officers knowing the fact that they don't have to hire a police officer, but they choose to for the safety of their employees and the work that's being done. It also provides amazing goodwill for the community when we have tourists come into the city to be able to guide people around the city. Instead, we'll have a flagger stand there who doesn't know where to send somebody, just says, "Move along, sir." This past week, there was a sinkhole that opened up about 10 o'clock in the morning on State Street. You think a flagger would have known what to do, but there were police officers working that detail at the other end, and they got on it. It just can't be about the dollars. It has to be the fine balance. I'm going to again, ask this item be tabled, sent to Traffic and Safety, allow us to properly look at it, make sure we have everything taken care of, and how these people are going to be trained, who's going to take care of the certification process. Because are we doing the certification as a city? If so, if the class isn't done right to the right standards, who's liable? And I think these questions have to be answered before we take such a fast, swift motion. So, again, I'll make the motion that this be tabled to Traffic and Safety for further review and report back.
Just going to ask, well, first of all, do we have a second? Then I'll talk to the city attorney.
Do we have a second for Councilor Smith's motion?
Second.
We have a second. Is that a tabling motion?
Yeah, yes, and the motion takes precedence.
All right. So we're going to have to vote on that. We're not debating the merits. We're debating the tabling of it. So we'll have a vote.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, Your Honor, I think the motion's debatable.
All right, go ahead. Yep.
Council Smith, can you tell us who's on the Traffic and Safety Committee? I don't know the makeups of all the committees.
Councilor Spear used to be, but it's chaired by myself. It is set up of, we have police, fire, DPW, as well as civilians are on this, regular citizens of Portsmouth are on the committee. If you want the individual names, I see the city manager is flipping through his files now. But it's a committee of 7. It's an ad hoc committee of the city council. It is not a separate committee. That's the reason why month after month I always bring the minutes to be approved by council, because it's an ad hoc committee. It's not a standard committee.
City, go ahead.
Want me to speak to that? Do you want me to answer that? Let's see. Traffic and Safety Committee, I just want to make sure I have the most updated list. I think I do, but correct me, Kelly, if I'm wrong.
Sure.
We have John Connors, Ronald Cipher, the Fire Chief, Frederick Gray, Police Chief, Public Works Director, Councilor Smith, Traffic Engineer, and Christina Westphal.
And we have tonight, there were 2 up for consideration tonight, one of them being former city councilor Harold Whitehouse.
Okay, so that's the composition of the meeting. Do you have further discussion or question?
My concern is, are all the stakeholders being represented on this committee? I mean, I don't know who can answer that question, but if we're going to get accurate information, we do have a lot of conflicting information here. I guess I just want to make sure that we as councilors get accurate information about this whole issue. So we rely on traffic and safety to do that for us.
Well, we rely on traffic and safety to make so many other important decisions on safety issues throughout the city. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to tackle this one. You have the police there. We're working with the DPW. I'm certain we can have someone available to us from the legal department if we needed to. But I certainly believe in the qualifications of every member of that Traffic and Safety Committee to look through all of this information, especially in light of these guidelines that were just given out to us, and how their training has to be taken place, to make sure we have those answers in place before we move forward with this ordinance.
Further discussion? If not, everybody ready to vote? Roll call, please. Again, a motion in favor is to vote in agreement with Councilor Smith's motion.
Assistant Mayor Noveline Clayburgh.
Yes.
Councilor Lister.
Yes.
Councilor Hetmanic.
No.
Councilor Spear.
No.
Councilor Dwyer.
No.
Councilor Coviello.
No.
Councilor Kennedy.
No.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Farini.
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. We're back to the motion in chief. Discussion on the motion in chief. Councilor Spear.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to the motion. First, I wanted to thank the police chief and the commission for coming out and speaking, and all the public speakers as well. It's definitely been informative, I think, for the whole council and bringing this ordinance forward. But at the end of the day, also with the input from the public works director, I still believe that the original ordinance as presented both saves the public money or exposure from money that's been well presented to us, and it provides for the public safety. I think the flagging control as described in the DOT, both the federal and the state, works well for other communities, and it could work well for us. So I think the public safety is not compromised, and I think the taxpayer ends up saving money. So I support the ordinance as originally submitted.
Further discussion. Councilor Lister.
I also am concerned about public safety, and I truly believe that there are some times we need to have police officers on duty, and sometimes we might be able to have well-trained flaggers on some of the side streets. I would also like to commend the police chief and Steve Parkinson and Bob Sullivan with John Bohanko. With the amendment, I think everyone out there, the police officers that are here, know that given the situation we're in fiscally, and not to be talking just the fiscal side of this, I think everyone knows there needs to be some kind of a compromise. And that together we have to reach the compromise to be able to have this public safety we need. That's why I voted to go to the Public Safety, Parking and Safety Committee, just to make sure we all have the right information, we all are informed, because I would hate to see us be penny-wise and pound foolish down the road. Although I'm concerned that, as I said, there are sometimes we can have police officers, and other times we could have well-trained flaggers.
Further discussion. Councillor Dwyer.
I also believe there is a compromise position, but I think it might not go quite as far as the proposed amendment from offered by the Police Commission. So I'd like to offer a partial, an amendment that is a partial of that.
If you're going to make a motion to amend, I'm going to request in accordance with Rule 9 that it be in writing. So if we need to take a brief recess and you wish to craft that, perhaps we could do that, but this is a technically difficult item, and I think it's important that it be in writing and read into the record in that fashion. If you've already done it, that's great.
It's actually in writing. I'm just crossing out a portion.
Okay. You want to direct us to the portion of our package that has that?
Of the proposed amendment that's dated 3/23.
Last page in the,
of the packet that we had.
last page on the ordinance.
I would propose that we retain the opening preamble and letter C with the one change in letter C to substitute and for or.
Whenever the chief of police and the director of public works.
That's correct. Determine that circumstances exist creating a public safety concern such that the use of uniformed police officers should be required.
Now, Councilor Dwyer, just so that I understand this, you then wish that the compromise, is it included within the ambit of your motion that that be the only portion of this that be amended? So,
Right.
So the motion before us, let's just be clear, the motion before us,
Oh, I'm sorry. And striking out A and B.
striking A and B.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to.
Oh, when I said only C, I meant striking A
Right,
and
so you
B.
understand the motion that's before us, you understand the motion to amend by Councilor Dwyer, that provides discretionary circumstances she has described. She's made a motion to amend. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second discussion. Councilor Noveline Claiborne.
I like this amendment. I think it allows the use of flaggers when the police chief and the director of public works feel that it's okay, and it allows them to use police officers when they feel public safety is at a risk. So I think that it's a good compromise. I think I think of crossing guards, and we all know the crossing guards that our schools use, and they do a great job. And I know they're well trained. Of course, they're well trained by the police department. They do a great job, and they save us some money. They save us a lot of money. So I think there is room for flaggers, and I think there are many opportunities where we can use flaggers, and the city and the taxpayers we're all going to save a lot of money. We're going to make it easier for our taxpayers, and the city will obviously save some dollars. So I think we can look at the crossing guards as a good example of how this can work. But I like that option because we can maybe even test the waters for a while, and then if it doesn't work, we can change the ordinance. That's the beauty of having a city ordinance is, the city council can come together and amend that if they have to. So I do like the motion, and I plan to support it.
City Manager, you've requested opportunity to speak.
Just inquiry just on the motion. Once if it does pass, in the event that the police chief and the public works director disagree, what happens?
I suppose if it says and, if they disagree, then a flagger is not required, a police officer is not required. I mean,
So basically what we
opinion.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Say that again.
Maybe Bob could say it better.
The proposed amendment would require that uniformed police officers be used whenever the chief of police and the director of public works determine that circumstances exist creating a public safety concern such that the use of uniformed police officers should be required. Since the chief of police and the director of public works would have to agree to trigger that requirement, if the chief of police and the director of public works did not agree, the requirement would not be triggered.
So, City Attorney Sullivan, I just want to ask a question. Would the first paragraph, except for work performed under the contract with city, be still in place under this amendment?
Yes. The way it's been stated by Councilor Dwyer, that what she called the preamble, but that section, a new section 8.605, uniformed police officer required, would be created. That preamble, as she referred to it, stays in. Proposed Amendment A comes out. Proposed Amendment B comes out. Proposed Amendment C becomes A.
Okay.
I have a question for the city attorney. Given that the public works director works for the city manager, if the city manager, to whom the public works director reports, were to indicate that he did not believe that the
don't put words in my mouth, Mayor.
Well, it's the position, not the man. So if the city manager were to order the public works director to either go with the flagger or not go with the flagger, whose authority would prevail?
Well, my view is the public works director works for the city manager, and just like the police department, the city administration has a rank structure and a chain of command. It's not as rigid as the police department, but it exists. And if the city manager gives a direction to the public works director, I think the public works director is obligated to follow that direction.
Councilor Coviello.
I am not going to support the amendment, and for a couple of reasons. One is I think it can create some interdepartment hostility, and you put people in difficult positions to approve it. And I also think that in getting this to actually perform and work will make a clumsy process for an applicant needing a flagger or a police detail. I think it won't run smoothly. It won't be rapid. It will take time to occur, and I would prefer more of a concrete. If we're going to go with amendment, more of a concrete example, not saying item B, but like item B, where you outline where it is, so it's very clear to everybody where it's required, where it's not. I don't think I think you can create a lot of problems by putting different departments in charge of it.
Councilor Kennedy.
I like the amendment, and the reason I like it is because, and I understand what Councilor Coviello is saying. However, I believe we have professionality, and we hire professionals, and that they can work this out. One of the things I like about the amendment is that it allows us to look at safety, what the chief has brought forward, what other people have brought forward, that there are sometimes, what Councilor Smith, when the lights are out, we might need a police officer. Sometimes at night when work is heavy and things are happening, we might need a police officer. This allows for that to happen. And allows that we make choices on safety and concern. And I would like to think that we have professional people working here that can work together and make these choices on safety. And if we don't, then we got a bigger issue. But I think that we have people that can follow this, and we can say what is safe, what is not, what is appropriate to have police officers, what's appropriate to have flaggers. And if we can't do that, then we need to work on that particular aspect of it. But the bottom line is, I'm asking two experts who have spent a lot of time in the city to make the right decision on safety for the community. And I hope they can do it.
Thank you. Before we continue, I'm going to request from the chair at this point that we're going to continue with discussion. I didn't know whether or not the city clerk she's been writing diligently here, but we'll continue with discussion, and then we'll take a recess after the vote, okay? But we're going to understand that we're voting on Councilor Dwyer's amendment, and then we're going to have the motion in chief. People speaking to Councilor Dwyer's amendment, Councilor Hetmanik.
I'm going to support the amendment. I'm looking at the streets and then looking at the guidelines for safety that were handed out. The guidelines talk about streets that are posted at less than 45 miles per hour and have a volume of less than 15,000 vehicles a day are appropriate for flaggers, and all of these streets in the city probably fall into that. less than 15,000 vehicles a day. So I like the idea, as Councilor Kennedy talked about, of having two professional people decide where police are appropriate for safety reasons. And I guess it also answers the question of the contractor who may prefer to have a policeman can request it, and I'm sure they'll agree. So it's a much more flexible approach. I like it.
Councilor Lister.
Just a point of clarification, we're talking about flag people at construction sites only, because we've heard Market Square Day, bike races, and those kinds of things. We're not talking about those kinds of events. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Then I would support the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment? I'm going to pass the gavel, and I'll just briefly speak to it.
Mayor Farini?
I will support this amendment, although I believe as a council that we should ask for a report back in the event we pass it. And we should keep some statistics as to how often this occurs. And if and to what extent contractors repeatedly ask for police officers, that's something we would want to, for example, know. So in the event that it passes, I think we should keep good data and keep a close eye on it. And I think the discretionary portion of it makes more sense than the more mechanistic amendment, which is presently not before us, and I intend to support it. Further discussion. Councilor Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to finish what Councilor Hedmark was saying, and that is, it continues on to the next paragraph. Although typically not necessary, uniformed officers may also be used in the presence of roads that are posted less than 45 and have volumes of less than 15,000. If the New Hampshire Department of Transportation determined that police presence are necessary to address specific safety issues. Continues on to say to include a work zone with a high rate of crashes, a work zone with vehicles traveling at excessive speeds, a work zone where with poor highway geometrics, and a work zone with excessive east-west sun glare, which we know we have that in this situation. I mean, in this city, anytime you come up Daniel Street in the summertime in the evening, you see the sun glare that's there. So again, even the guidelines, again, that were just handed to us says that police officers still have an area where safety is concerned.
Okay, we have an amendment before us. I see one more council with his hand ready to go, but I will seek to limit debate if we continue on this issue. And then we have the amendment, or the motion in chief. So now we're with the amendment as offered by Councilor Dwyer. Does everyone understand the amendment? Ready to vote? All in favor, roll call, please. Well, roll call, so it's whether you're in favor or not.
Assistant Mayor Noveline Clayburgh.
Yes.
Councilor Lister.
Yes.
Councilor Hetmanic.
Yes.
Councilor Spear.
Yes.
Councilor Dwyer.
Yes.
Councilor Coviello.
No.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Farini.
Yes. Now we have the motion in chief, which is the motion originally offered by Councilor Spear. It has been amended by the vote we have just taken. Further discussion on the motion before us.
Move the question.
If you vote yes, you support the motion offered by Councilor Spear as amended by the motion of Councilor Dwyer that we just
It's a
voted.
repeat of the last vote.
It is.
Move the question.
The question has been moved. Call for a roll call, please.
Assistant Mayor Noveline Clayburgh.
Yes.
Councilor Lister.
Yes.
Councilor Hetmanic.
Yes.
Councilor Spear.
Yes.
Councilor Dwyer.
Yes.
Councilor Coviello.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Farini.
Yes.
Unanimous.
At this time, I'd like to thank you for your patience and thank everyone in the gallery for their patience, and we'll
5-minute
take a
recess?
5-minute recess.
This goes.
waiting on Nancy.
6:22 according to this.
Go ahead. Well, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. And speak slowly enough so that nothing dispositive occurs until the assistant mayor is with us.
I move to suspend the rules to go past 10 o'clock.
Thank you for that. We have a motion to suspend. Second, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. That's unanimous. Dubious, but unanimous. So now we go to item 8A, which is next on the agenda, the International Food Protection Training Institute grant acceptance.
So moved.
We need a motion to accept and expend the grant of $1,500. Thank you, Councilor Smith. Do we have a second? We have a second discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. That's unanimous. Item B, acceptance of a PSNH grant for Art Speak in the amount of $5,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Whoa.
Go ahead.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. None opposed. Item C, acceptance of Seacoast Evacuation Planning Project
So
grant.
moved.
We have a motion to accept and approve. Councilor Smith, seconded. Councilor Kennedy. Discussion. Hearing none. Everyone ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. That's unanimous. The next item is.
Just want to note that the fire chief was here to answer any questions you might have.
Hi, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. We next have item 9A, second reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 11, subsection 10.1115.40 and subsection 10.1115.42, amount of payment in lieu. The fee per space as of January 1, 2010 shall be $2,000. And the motion, we've had first reading, so we'd be moving to pass second reading. If someone would make the motion.
So moved.
Councilor Smith.
Second.
We have a second discussion. Hearing none. Councilor Kennedy.
I just have a historical question. I'm kind of perplexed, and I kind of agreement that it only is one entity of our downtown that has to pay this. Is there a rationale behind that?
It's not just one entity. Maybe I could have Rick come forward because it's more than just one entity. I'll let him explain it.
Mr. Tainer.
Thank you. This fee it's not a mandatory fee, although it can feel like a mandatory fee. Basically, the city requires parking, off-street parking to be provided throughout the city. But in the downtown area, in recognition of the congestion, the density of the downtown, and the availability of public parking spaces both on-street and off-street, the zoning ordinance gives an option to pay, basically to buy your way out of your parking requirement. And so that's the kind of the general consideration, is if you want to have that parking requirement downtown, and if you do you want to have that buyout option. But it's because of the density of the downtown particularly that it allows that.
Councilor Kennedy.
I guess what I meant one entity, and I'm sorry it's late and I spoke probably wrong, but what I was saying, I've been getting a couple calls that it's only restaurants.
Oh. Okay.
And my question is, why has it been chosen just the restaurants, and why isn't it anyone that does business down there have to come up with some kind of idea of parking?
Mm-hmm. I understand. I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. During the process of developing the ordinance, we looked at reducing parking requirements across the board, and what we did is it isn't the dollar amount that's targeted toward restaurants, it's actually the requirement to provide parking that is targeted toward restaurants. And it's a good question. What we did is we reduced parking across the board. We actually eliminated all parking requirements for first floor uses except for restaurants, as you note. And the issue was just concern about the high parking demand of restaurants. Now, as was noted by I think the person who spoke in the public hearing, the music hall is a use that, it's a very unique use. It generates a lot of parking demand. I don't think we looked at that very specific special use because there aren't a lot of those, but there are a lot of restaurants, and so that was why it was left in the ordinance to have a parking requirement for restaurants, even though it's a lower parking requirement in the downtown than in other parts of the city, but there's still a requirement there for parking for restaurants. Does that help?
Well, I guess the question is, how come we didn't look at, or maybe you did, and I don't have that information, look at other downtown uses for parking charge or no downtown uses for parking charge. I guess, and I saw your background information here, but maybe you can give a little bit more for
Again,
the
it's not the parking charge so much, because the charge applies to anybody who's required to provide parking. It's just that restaurant uses, because they're higher demand parking, are more likely to want to pay that charge. But any upper floor use, there is a parking requirement for any upper floor use. It's a lower requirement than for restaurants, but there still is a requirement of 1 space per 1,000 square feet. So somebody who's building a new building in the downtown could provide parking for those upper floor spaces, or could buy their way out by paying the in lieu fee. And what we did is we reduced parking requirements and increased the parking fee. But because the reason it came up was a particular restaurant came up where they had divided the building into lots of condominium units, and so it was all focused on that one use. It's too complicated. It is complicated, I understand. Yeah.
And I realize that, but what I'm saying is that we allow other stores. I mean, I just happened to run into a young chef who would really love to look at potentially owning a restaurant in Portsmouth. That's the ultimate goal. And he said he couldn't do it, but he could own a boutique or something else because of the parking fee. And I guess if we're, is it something maybe we don't want restaurants downtown? Is that something that we're trying to persuade against and looking at your planning? I don't know. I guess I can't figure out why one shop, we're asking them when you have probably in and out traffic, probably hitting the same people that are going to be sitting at the restaurant. And we're asking one entity to pay and one not to.
Right.
And I'm really perplexed about that. I'll be honest with you. And maybe it's because I spend most of my day trying to get equality for all. But I have a hard time getting around my thinking of why we do that. When if we offered everything, then it would be less. So any entity could come downtown and enjoy. If we split the costs, we'd still have the money coming in, but everyone would be part of that.
And I think part of I understand your question, and in a way I can't answer it except to say that was a decision that was made while we were reviewing all the different possibilities, and there was a suggestion at one point to eliminate all first floor parking requirements, but what ended up coming out of it was to eliminate all first floor parking requirements except for those for restaurants. But I will say that you'll probably hear more about this later, because as I mentioned, this downtown property owners focus group is going to come with some recommendations to the planning board, which the planning board will be considering. And one of the things they may recommend is to go back to those basics and say what kinds of parking requirements, just forget the fee, but what kind of parking should be required for what types of uses, and should we be going back to 1995 when there weren't any parking requirements downtown?
And just so that thank you, and just so that we know, if you advocated against it, then that's good that we've advocated against it. There is, again, a likelihood this is an interim measure.
Yes.
There is a likelihood that this will come back to us. Planning board considerations and their report back, as we typically do, carries great weight before us. It gives us an opportunity to engage in further questioning. It's the limited item that's before us this evening. The greater philosophical question will come to us in due course. Further discussion, Council Coviello.
It's a perfect segue into my question for Rick, is that are there any, is there any amount of pending applications that are waiting anxiously for us to make this change?
Yes, I mean there is the application that came before you that started the whole thing that came to you on January 21st, or came to the planning board on January 21st from the Worth block, which is also before the Board of Adjustment with a request for a variance to get out of the parking requirement altogether, and I do know that there is another potential tenant who would like to move into that same space. It's that one, but it's that one space, right, as far as I know.
And we'll note that it's retroactive in nature. Further discussion. Council Coviello. Anything further?
I'm all set.
Anyone else? Ready
Call
to
the
vote?
question.
Council Smith. He's called the question, so we're ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
None
No.
opposed?
No.
We have a no.
Mayor?
Council Coviello.
I wonder, I know this is retroactive, but I wonder if due to some time sensitivity, easy for me to say, if we should, I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules and hold a third hearing tonight, third reading tonight.
Motion to suspend The purpose will be it's a motion to suspend the rules, and then we take up third reading, okay? So we understand what's before us. It's been seconded by Councilor Spear. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any? None opposed. It's unanimous. We're now having third reading. So we need a motion to pass third reading.
So moved.
Council Coviello.
Second.
We have second. Further discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous. One opposed. And we now move on to the consent agenda. We have
I'd like to remove item E and H, please.
noted. We will remove those and do those separately. Let's take them up first, and then we'll do the consent agenda. Well, it doesn't matter, so we'll take them up first. The first is item E, a letter from Deborah Bouchard-Smith, Scarecrows of the Port, requesting permission to place scarecrows in designated locations throughout the Portsmouth downtown area from October 15, 2010 to November 2nd, 2010. This would be referred to the city manager with power if someone cares to make the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous.
Abstain.
Note the abstention of Councilor Smith. Thank you for that. And then, was it item H, Councilor Smith?
Yes.
It was. So 2010 omnibus sidewalk obstruction renewals. There's an attached listing. Moving to the city manager with power would be the preferred motion.
Moved.
Second.
And we avoid a lot of A-frame signs. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed?
Abstain.
And no Councilor Smith's abstention. For the record, we now go to the consent agenda, less those two items. The first is item A, a letter from Mike Young, president of the Portsmouth Babe Ruth, requesting permission to install temporary signage at Literary Field for the 2010 baseball season. The second is item B, acceptance of donation to the Pierce Island Committee from Little Sampson Productions of $729.33. The third is acceptance of donation to the Portsmouth Fire Department for the purchase of the co-oximeter from Colween Management and Portsmouth Hilton Garden Inn in the amount of $500. Item D, acceptance of donations for Art Speak Overnight Art, First Giving, $46.99. Educational Planning, Allison Forbes, $100. Grubb Ellis Coldstream Real Estate Advisors, $100. Margaret Talcott and L. John Scherer, $100. First Foods LLC, Annika Johns, $200. And Sunrise Rotary Charitable Corporation, $1,500. Next is item F, letter from Josh Pierce, Seacoast Area Bicycle Routes, requesting permission to hold a commuter breakfast from 7 a.m. To 10 a.m. on Friday, May 21st, 2010 at Popovers in Market Square. SABR also requests that the City Council officially recognize May 21, 2010 as Bike Walk to Work Day in Portsmouth. Item G, and the last item on the consent agenda, is a letter from Megan Roach, March of Dimes, requesting permission to hold the 2010 Seacoast March for Babies on March 15, 2010. Do we have a motion to adopt?
Accept consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous. Item 11, presentation and consideration of written communications and petitions. First is item A, a letter from David Topham, Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire, requesting permission to use Portsmouth as part of the route on Sunday, May 16, 2010. Do we have a motion to refer?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to refer to the city manager with power. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. That's unanimous. The next is a letter from Peter Floros and Eli Socorellis, State Street Saloon, requesting an extension to the dumpster licenses on Church Street. Do we have a motion?
Move it to city manager.
Second.
We have a motion to the city manager with power. Thank you, Councilor Smith. And to the second, discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. That's unanimous. The next is a letter from Deb Weeks, the Green Monkey Restaurant, requesting an extension to the dumpster license on Church Street. Do we have a motion?
Move to the city manager.
Thank you. We have a motion duly seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. That's unanimous. A letter from Julie Slayton Frank, South Church, requesting a renewal of the dumpster license on Church Street. Do we have a motion?
To the city manager.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, and that is unanimous. City Manager, your portion of the agenda, item 1.
Thank you, Your Honor. As requested by the City Council, bring back a report back on the issuance of a license for 21 Brewster Street boarding house permit. This has been reviewed by the city attorney's office and the health department, and they are in concurrence that this license should be issued.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? That's unanimous. Item 2.
The next item, Your Honor, deals with establish a work session regarding tax rate policy discussion. This was brought up by Councilor Dwyer at the last meeting, and as directed by the City Council, I'm requesting the City Council establish a work session on Monday, April 12th, 2010 at 6:30 p.m. in the Eileen Dondero Foley Council Chambers regarding the tax rate policy discussion.
We need a motion to establish the work session.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We'll let Councilor Dyer have the motion and Councilor Smith have the second under the circumstances. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous. Item 4.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item deals with the public input session regarding the pool. And again, as directed by the City Council, I'm recommending that a public input session be scheduled for Monday, April 19th, which is before your regular City Council meeting at 6 p.m. What we'll do is probably set it up in a similar format as a work session style, with a podium for the presenters to come forward before the City Council and do it for about an hour to do that.
Do we have a motion to establish the input session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous.
The next item, Your Honor, deals with an issue of expansion of membership at Spinnaker Point Adult Recreation Center. When Assistant Mayor Clayburgh met with the fee committee, one of the things that came up was how can we expand some of our revenues in the area of fees. And one area that came up was to try to expand into non-residents for Spinnaker Point. But our original agreement with the Spinnaker Point Condominium Association required that we have only residents, adult residents over the age of 18, utilize the facility. That dates back to 2001. After the meeting with the fee committee, Russ Wilson and I made contact with the Condominium Association, and they met with us about a month ago, and we put forward, which is in your packet, a proposed pilot program that would amend the agreement to allow for up to 300 members that are non-residents with certain criteria. They'd have to own property in the city, or they'd have to work in the city. And we do it in increments of 100, so that after 100 are on, we'd evaluate it, talk to the board, then the next 100, evaluate it, talk to the board. We feel that by implementing this initiative, that we could make Spinnaker Point 100% self-sufficient. Right now, it's 75% self-sufficient.
Okay.
So I'm asking for a motion to allow me to proceed with this.
So moved.
Councilor Smith.
Second.
Seconded by the Assistant Mayor. Discussion.
I think Mr. Coviello,
Tony, Councilor Coviello.
Thank you. John, I'm just concerned that, at the twice the fee for a resident, is there a sense that we're going to get members? Because it seems to be that's like approaching or above the rate of a private.
Right. And if I might, Your Honor.
Please.
Well, that'd be certainly up to the, we have had a lot of people come in and inquire.
Yeah.
Why can't I belong here? I work in town, or I own property in town. So we'll see. And if
Okay.
if it does, and that's, that's why we're going to have the pilot, and we'll see how it goes.
So we're not stuck with it for 10 years, the term of the lease?
No, it's a one-year pilot, basically.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Dwyer.
I think this is a great idea, and, given that our office is very close to this, and we have a lot of employees who, of course, live in Kittery or are non-residents and have asked about such a thing. So I think this will go really well. I guess in chatting with some people about it today, residents, people raise the issue of, I'll call it enforcement, in terms of whether it's, are we really paying attention to, are there people who are using guest passes who, kind of an unlimited number of guest passes as opposed to really following what they should already as non-residents? And I have no idea. So I just...
That's a good point. We'll evaluate it.
Yeah.
As we go forward, sure. We do in guest passes. We do make additional revenue with guest passes, but I think that's probably a good idea to evaluate the price of guest passes as they compare to the fee.
Okay, Councilor Coviello.
I would mention that the new system with the passes, a photo pops up when you swipe your pass, so
So it should.
the members are, it's very be hard to sneak by on that one.
Yeah.
If the guest passes, he could.
Unless they are masters of disguise. Further,
And I just want to thank the Assistant Mayor for working with us on this at the Fee Committee.
thank you. Thanks to the Assistant Mayor, Fee Committee. We move on. Number 5. Oh, we need to vote this. So all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Chair votes aye. That's unanimous. Item 5.
Yes, thank you, Ron. The next item deals with an acceptance of an easement at 70 Lafayette Road. Basically, this is after the fact. The project is done. It's a Lafayette School Senior Apartments. The Giamattis family would request an easement for adjustments that deal with the fence on the property line. Everybody's in agreement with this. And Legal Department and Lafayette School Apartments request that City Council accept this easement.
So an easement for James and Beverly Giamattis. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous. Item 6.
The next item, Your Honor, deals with Mr. Cronin, if you recall, provided the City Council with a request to sell his property, 3.2 acres, to the city, located at 56 Lois Street. And this was referred to the Planning Board. The Planning Board basically came back with a recommendation that we shouldn't buy this land unless it's just for a nominal fee. And the owner and his real estate agent basically indicated that they would like the opportunity to go before the Conservation Commission to make their case. So we said fine. They went to the Conservation Commission on March 10th, and basically the Conservation Commission said the same thing. We don't think we want to spend city money on this, but if it's nominal, then we'd support it. So essentially, by accepting the recommendation of the Planning Board, you would be accepting the land if it's donated or acquired with a nominal fee. If not, he just continues to own it.
Do we have a motion in accordance with the city manager's request?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion. Council Smith.
For a nominal fee, do we have a...
Probably would be just the filing fees and probably whatever legal
Tax stamps.
to do.
Tax stamps,
Yeah,
thank you.
that type of stuff.
Further discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Your Honor. Under informational items, there's one that I would like to bring to your attention is the Tall Ships event, and you've probably read about it in the newspaper. We did have a meeting of all the stakeholders to discuss this matter as it relates to the proposed Tall Ships arrival, May 28th through May 31st of 2010. I have attached a letter from Captain Marconi from the port, along with Don Coker, who is the chair of the Maritime Commission, and also a memo to file as relates to the meeting that took place with the stakeholders. Stakeholders that were there were representatives from the Strawberry Bank, Prescott Park, from the South End, from the various city agencies, and so it was unanimously felt that this would be a win-win situation. Pierce Island was there, the representation. I know Councilor Kennedy was there. If she would like to add anything, I'd be more than welcome to have her do so. I think it was a very positive meeting, and people felt pretty good about it. So,
Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, everyone was really excited. The South End voted unanimously to support this and offer their support in any way they can. So I found it everyone's very excited.
Great.
So we'll be using, the one thing that would affect city property we're using Pierce Island for parking, but they have a pretty good system of volunteers in place, so we're going to be working with them and the entities that are involved. So expect a good event. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you to the city manager. I have a few items. I'll go through them quickly. First, our appointments for consideration. Stephen Phillip for appointment to the Pierce Island Committee. Kathleen Bergeron for appointment to the Citywide Neighborhood Steering Committee. Kent Kirkpatrick for appointment to Traffic and Safety. Harold Whitehouse for appointment to Traffic and Safety. We have some to be voted. Unless someone raises it, I'll go through all of them. We can vote them in one slate if there's no objection. The first is Tim Allison, reappointment to the Economic Development Commission. The second is Ron Zola, reappointment to the Economic Development Commission. The third is Jody Record, reappointment to the Board of Library Trustees. Megan Tehan, reappointment to the Board of Library Trustees. And Christina Westfall, reappointment to Traffic and Safety. We're going to need a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you for that. We now move, and I'm just, for informational purposes, indicating that the Operational Efficiencies Committee is set forth below. I do need to add one more resident representative. You'll note Rebecca Emerson from the school board, Carol Chelman from the school board, Kent LePage from the school board, Superintendent Ed McDonough as an ex officio member, and former Mayor Steve Marchand as a resident representative. And there are a few other people I'm considering and hope to bring that back. Also hope to bring back people for the committee with respect to the charter at the next meeting. And finally, well, I guess I have nothing further, and that brings us to item C, and that would be Councilor Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to accept the action sheet for the parking committee, which was held March 11th. If I can have a second.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Unless anyone has anything specific, what I just wanted to point out is item number 2 from the Taxi Commission. I believe that will require an ordinance change. And then item 6 down below, just want to point out that there will be a one parking space loss on Market Street, and that's due to the regulations of crosswalks, because you can't have crosswalks go to where cars park.
Okay, so
if anyone has anything specific, I'm happy to answer.
We have the minutes and action sheet before us, duly moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
One. Council Kennedy.
Oh, no, I'm opposed.
One opposed. And so, yep, one opposed, no. And that brings us to item 13, miscellaneous and unfinished business. Do we have any? Councilor Spear.
I was going to mention some things about the JBC, but I wonder if Councilor Dwyer wanted
Councilor
to...
Dwyer.
What I was going to do.
Which would be great.
That is that, and you'll all be receiving information about this, but just to get dates on the calendar since April is so full. April 28th is a public meeting in the Levinson Room, 5 to 6:30, with the architects, the construction team, to present what will essentially be, I'd like to call it a final draft of the schematic design and site plan. We do want to present to people in a public way the work of the committee. Certainly there's time after that to make changes, but that kind of wraps up a first phase of schematic design work. So is that what you were going to mention?
That's going to be an opportunity for a more, people want to get, walk up to the diagrams and see them. It's more of an interactive thing. And then on May 5th, there's in this chamber, I believe, a more formal vote by the JBC to hopefully approve the...
Well, I have a question. Councilor Dwyer, I believe it was the case with the library that in an advisory capacity, the Historic District Commission did review the plans of the library, if I recall. Mm-hmm. Is that proposed for the middle school?
Well, we haven't proposed the HDC, but the TAC, Planning Board, those review boards that pertain to the property are on the schedule, and actually the architectural team has talked about, has got them even timed out when they're going to those boards.
Okay, thanks. Any further discussion on that? I guess Councilor Kennedy.
I would think it would be appropriate to ask the historical district to be part of that as one of the time slots.
It's something we can bring to the committee.
The school is not in the HDC.
I know, but just out of...
The library wasn't either.
No, the library wasn't either, and that was...
Pointing it out.
Okay.
I have one miscellaneous.
We'll go to you in a second, Councilor. So Councilor Dwyer has indicated she'll bring that back to them.
To the committee,
To the committee, which is much appreciated. Councilor Kennedy.
I just want to let everyone know that this Thursday at 5 o'clock at the Sheridan, as you know, our fishermen are having hardships and a lot of trouble with sector managements, a whole new philosophy being brought down by NOAA. And NOAA has agreed to come to Portsmouth and meet with New Hampshire fishermen at 5 o'clock. Anyone that has, this was a last minute thing, they added it to the list. And anyone that has the ability to show up and support and listen, it would be we'd all be grateful. I will be there, but if anyone else would like to join, that'd be great.
Thanks, Councilor Kennedy. And I would also...
Thursday,
yep, go ahead.
The 8th at 5 o'clock.
Thank you.
Where? At the Sheridan.
I would also, at this time, the city manager has indicated, I believe, but we'll indicate once again, that he will be making the budget available at 3 o'clock on 2:30 rather, at his conference room on the 4th floor. The press will be there. Councilors are most welcome. and for the press conference at which he presents the budget, so that in our well-defined, clearly delineated, and coherent and transparent budget process, people will now have an opportunity to see the budget as presented by the city manager after the departments have presented theirs to
We'll be
him.
online that afternoon.
And it will be online that afternoon. I would also finally ask councilors not to forget to take a good look at your 2010 schedule of city council meetings and work sessions as it's beginning to heat up. And so, yes, Assistant Mayor Noveline Claiborne.
I just wanted to congratulate Councilor Dwyer. I saw an article in the paper yesterday. She has been awarded the UNH Community Service Award.
Granite State.
Granite State Award.
Congratulations to
For
our
all of
friend
her
and
community service over the years, and congratulations, Chris.
That's very nice. Congratulations to our friend Councilor Dwyer. And with that, we'll entertain a motion to
So moved.
adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you and good night.
Hey, Eric.